Dan Pfefferman.
And I'm Benny Shoulder, and welcome to Jewanced.
We're two Jewish guys. We grew up in America, we live in Israel, and we're looking to challenge popular conceptions, think critically, examine independently, and most of all, seek nuance.
Each episode will host a different guest. Together, we'll take a deep dive into politics, foreign affairs, religion, science, technology, food, the arts, business, you name it. A lot of it will deal with the Jewish world in Israel, but not all.
Our goal? To create a platform where people share their stories, insights, and visions. No talking points, no script, no agenda. Just a deeper, nuanced understanding of the world around us.
Join us as we explore, think, debate, and discuss, and perhaps most of all, listen. Jewanced.
You know, like nuanced, but with a J?
Yeah, they get it. Dude, let's just start.
Okay.
Hey, everybody out there in podcast land. Hope you're doing okay. Dan, how you doing?
After the internet crapped out, I am doing much better.
You need a drink? I think we all need a drink. We're going to have a good time in this podcast.
Whiskey on all of us for those who drink, and coffee for those who don't.
All right, man. Check it. Welcome to our amazing panel of guests. Our very, very patient, amazing panel of guests to this very special live edition of the podcast.
Okay, so we're going to introduce these guests in just a minute. They are coming from all around the Middle East and all the corners of the world through and let's try this again, unironically, the marvels of modern technology are sitting around the world, joining us today to discuss shifting regional perceptions in the wake of the Abraham Accords that brought about the normalization of relations between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and between Israel and Bahrain.
This is, we hope, the first of many Jewanced episodes dedicated to exploring and understanding Israel's newfound relationship with the UAE, Bahrain, and hopefully more countries in the near future.
So before we start, we have a few thank yous. We have a few acknowledgments. This episode is being sponsored by Trends Research and Advisory, an Abu Dhabi-based research and policy center blending research with innovation. By the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University, Israel's leading academic think tank on Middle East affairs, and by the UAE Israel Business Council, the leading forum bringing together Emiratis and Israelis to build relationships, promote trade, cooperation, and innovation.
And by Kenneth Tours and Guild Travel. The Persian Gulf states are one by one signing peace agreements with Israel. This new era of acceptance, along with increased stability and security in the region, will enable Jewish travelers to enjoy experiences previously inaccessible. Moreover, visits to the Gulf states will not only offer a glimpse into the region's Jewish past and present, but also the ability to experience history in the making. Guild Travel is honored to be a preferred travel company. They showcase the culture, opulence, history, and emerging Jewish life in the Gulf. They are at the forefront of creating people-to-people experiences for Federation missions as well as individuals and family trips. They cannot wait to share these unique destinations and experiences with you.
And we cannot wait for tourism to return to this country.
Right. So check it. They're doing an event on November 5th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern called Kosherati, a Jewish spin on Gulf foods, together with Dr. Eli Kriel. Dr. Eli Kriel is the first person to have started a kosher kitchen in the UAE and the Gulf region. A longtime resident of Dubai, she's recognized the need to make kosher food available. So basically, she's going to be doing an online event, talking about the latest fusion of foods and cultures to come from the Gulf region. You'll meet her and learn about the basis of Emirati foods and discover how it combines with Jewish flavors. So for more information on that, you can check out Guild Travel's website at guildtravel.com, and the RSVP information is there.
Okay. And although she got kicked off the line, we have a special guest for you today. So when she comes back, we will introduce her. In the meantime, and one last thing before we get started.
So Jewanced is listener supported. So if you want to help support us to get better internet connections and other things so we can continue to produce great content, consider becoming a contributor today. We promise this won't happen when you're a sponsor. You can sign up on our website to become a monthly contributor, or like our co-sponsors today, contact us to sponsor your business or organization. For more information on and past episodes, see our website at www.jewanced.com. Take it away, Dan.
For those who become sponsors, we promise some cool Jewanced swag in the near future. So we have a special guest with us today. We would like to introduce the amazing, the elegant, the eloquent, the deputy mayor of the city of Jerusalem and one of the founders of the UAE Israel Business Council, Ms. Fleur Hassan Nahum, deputy mayor for Foreign Affairs, International Investment and Tourism. How are you, Fleur?
It's great to be here. I feel like we've already become best friends with the group. Can you guys hear me? I'm not quite sure anymore. It's like, honestly, Dan and Ben, we could have just carried on. It was fine. We were having a ball.
Don't need them.
It was great. Thank you. Thank you, guys. You guys are fantastic. You put together such great, fun content. And it's wonderful to be here with what I consider new friends. Every day I'm making new friends. And we're just so privileged, all of us, to live at this point in history. Little did we know 3 months ago, as we were all going about our business, worrying about the corona, that, God had such an amazing silver lining in store for us. And that is the hope and the window into what a new Middle East can look like. And this is what we have right now. And the difference between this piece, and I've said this again and again, and the other piece that we've had with Egypt, of course, and Jordan, and of course that piece, the piece with Egypt and Jordan, have been extremely important for regional stability. And maybe we have to look at that piece in the context of its day, days with no WhatsApp, and days with no Zooms, and days when connectivity was very, very different. We don't know what would have happened in that era had we been in the era of communication that we live in today. So I don't want to judge the people of the day, but what I see here is an amazing opportunity to build a real, from the ground up peace, and not just from the bottom down. And that is really the secret of real peace, people to people. And this is why my long-term, Doran Barak and I, who co-founded the UAE Business Council, we've known each other since we were 19 years old. That's a long time ago. And about a year ago.
So you only met like 2 years ago?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, exactly. So then about a year ago, he's been telling me, because Doran's been doing business in the UAE for quite a while now, because his business was always China and Africa facing. And for him, Dubai and Abu Dhabi were always, of course, the hub and the gateway to the East, the logistical and the financial hub. And he was telling me about a year ago, Fleur, the new horizon for Israel is the Gulf, is the UAE. That's where it's at. And we were talking. In June, we were meeting a lot with the American embassy here in Jerusalem, and we felt something was up. Didn't think this was going to happen so quickly, but we really did feel something was cooking. And so we created this council, which says, just create it, you build it and they will come. And we built it, and then we got fantastic partners on board. Many of them are in different forums. And today we have 2,500 people signed up to our online platform. And what's even more impressive is that it's 50% Emirati and 50% Israeli. And that is, I think, the big achievement, because it's easy to sit here and just get Israelis who are very excited. But to have the other side come and say, we're equally as excited, we're in this with you. And when I was in Dubai, I felt it from the people that I met, where it was government or new friends, business people, connected people. Everybody was so excited. I didn't have one negative experience from the whole week. And that is something which is incredible. As I was saying earlier to my new friends here, I come from Gibraltar, which is opposite Morocco. My mom's from Morocco. My husband, his family are from Iraqi origins. So for us as Sephardi Mizrahi Jews, to be living this era of a warm peace, which is where our communities came from to begin with, is something incredible. I am telling people every day, our children will one day say, how were those first days of peace? What did they look like? What did they feel like? And this is exactly what we're doing today. We are creating that window of hope for the entire region. And what we are creating today is the template for the way that peace will progress in the future, with all the other countries will join in. We are creating the template. And I couldn't think of better partners than my brothers and sisters from the UAE that I've met. Every one of them kind, generous, giving, and so excited about the new era that we're creating together. And so I want to let all the other super fascinating people on this panel talk, but I am extremely excited. I see Jerusalem, of course, as the center of the platform for peace, because we have the most diverse society of the whole of Israel here. We have 40% Arabs, you know, and different types of Jews from different countries. We have a very important Christian community. This is where we have the biggest challenges, but this is where we're going to solve those challenges and create the peace for the entire region. So, of course, I'm extremely excited. Dan and Ben, thank you so much for putting this together, technical difficulties and all. And now I will let my wonderful new friends talk about their experiences. It's wonderful to be here with all of you.
Flora,
Thank you, Flora.
so much.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to, I know you've got some busy evening as usual. You wear many hats and you're busy with all of them, but you're welcome to stay and participate as long as your schedule allows you. So in August, we here in Israel and our friends in the Arabian Gulf and many throughout the world were stunned to hear the news that Israel and the United Arab Emirates were set to normalize relations.
I was stunned.
We were all stunned. Soon after, Bahrain joined, and on September 15th, the leadership of the three countries met at the White House hosted by President Trump to sign the truly historic Abraham Accords. The announcement, the build-up, the signing, everything since has dominated social media in the news cycle, at least over here. Just last week, the first Etihad commercial flight landed, bringing a delegation of Emirati officials to sign MOUs and agreement just before an Israeli delegation was in Manama making official Israel's relations with that country, and an Emirati delegation came to finalize more agreements. Also, the government of the Knesset over here ratified these agreements. People are legitimately excited about this, about the opportunities, economic, diplomatic, even leisure and social, and they can't wait to go to Dubai to experience this marvel of the region that we're all talking about. I myself am insanely excited. I'm flying tomorrow to go to Dubai to meet my new Emirati friends that I've made. Omar, I wish you were going to be there. That I've made through my activity in the UAE Israel Business Council. For those who are regular listeners of the show, you'll know that I'm one of the founding members and have been active in trying to build this community. And it seems that our Emirati, our Bahraini, and other friends from around the region are equally as excited to get to know Israel and Israelis, and even Jews for some people who have not had the pleasure or misfortune, depending who you are. So for those slightly in the know, Israel and the UAE and Bahrain have had unofficial but increasingly friendly and open relations for a number of years. Israeli officials have publicly toured these countries. Tweets from leaders of both countries have grown noticeably warm over the years. And we know that there was little enmity between Israel and the Gulf Arab states, but nobody imagined such full and fast normalization. Sudan was just announced, and hopefully more soon. So in such a difficult and an unexpected year, with the COVID pandemic, the economic crisis, the global shutdown, the political polarization in some places, to finally have this amazingly positive development seemingly come out of nowhere was a very welcome surprise. And for those following, the positive developments and announcements of good news as this relationship zooms forward, no pun intended, because we're all sick of Zoom. So as our friend here on this panel, Omar, said in a symposium he delivered recently for Trends, we here in Israel were definitely shocked and surprised by the true warmth and curiosity we're seeing from our newfound friends. And that's why we here on Jewanced decided to put together a really special panel of guests.
All new friends of ours made since the Accords were signed to better understand how this all played out and how it was perceived in other parts of the region. We are thrilled to have with us today.
And we are thrilled they didn't leave during the technical difficulties.
Well, I thought that I was going to leave.
Never.
No, if it wasn't my house, I would have left. We have with us today Mr. Omar Al-Busaidi, Ms. Dr. Najat Al-Said, and Haitham Hassanin. Welcome, you guys. How are you?
As good as gold, sir.
We're fine.
Amazing. Amazing. So, you know what? Instead of us introducing you, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourself? Why don't we start with you? Haitham, tell us who you are, where you're from, where you live, what you're doing, and what you're watching on Netflix recently.
So, hello everyone. I think I'm very excited actually to be participating with all of you tonight, and especially it's an event sponsored by an Emirati and Israeli institution. I think this is great, and we are witnessing history in the making in the Middle East these days. Just a couple of months ago, nobody would have imagined that would happen. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Haitham. I'm a researcher. I specialize on the relationship between Arab states and Israel, and I wrote a lot about that. And I'm very glad to see that some of the ideas that I wrote about it for American policymakers when I was based in Washington, D.C., for think tanks, they are translating into a reality nowadays. And I think the future is very fruitful, and I'm very optimistic about that. A little bit about myself. So I grew up in Egypt, and then I moved to America, where I finished my education. And then one of the interesting encounters I had when I was at American universities is that I met people coming from Jewish background for the first time. And interestingly for me, they were studying about the Middle East. They study Arabic. They travel to the countries of my origin all the time. And they know about the societies I'm coming from, while I had no idea who they are, except they are the opposite side, the other side. I don't speak their language. I don't know anything about them except what I have seen on TV and I read in newspaper. So I said, okay, I'm just gonna go and try to learn about these people. And one of the fastest ways for me to do that was just through education. So I enrolled in an Israeli university, Tel Aviv University, and I had a fabulous time over there. I learned a lot about the culture, the society, the language, and the experience transformed my ideas, transformed me as a person. And I learned a lot about that. And since then, I have been active in trying to bridge the gap, speak to different people, try to write articles that enhance the relationship between the two sides. And and I'm very glad to be with you all today. An Emirati, welcome to the newcomers, Saudis, hopefully the future comers. And the Egyptians, of course, are the old joiners, the old comers.
Old news. And what are you binge watching on Netflix these days?
Not much, actually. I'm a big soccer fan, so I watch most of the time the Premier League.
Okay. All right. Najat, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm great.
So please tell us about yourself. Where are you? What are you doing? Where are you from? And what's your favorite kind of food?
What's my favorite what?
Your favorite kind of food. What do you like to eat?
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm currently living in UAE, and it is a wonderful place to live in. Going back to where I'm from Saudi Arabia, particularly from Medina. It's a holy city, but I lived in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. But before that, I was born and I lived until I spent my childhood in the States. Then we moved to Riyadh, the capital, because of my dad's work. And then after I finished high school, we went back to the States. Over there, honestly, it was a big turning point to me when I went to the States, because even though, living in Saudi Arabia is quite diverse. And it depends on the family themselves. My dad's section is quite open and liberal, but my mother's section is quite conservative. Because of his studies, because of his mingling with foreign people. But my mom was quite conservative. So when I went to the States, it was a big turn. And honestly, I felt like this is the first day of my life when I went there. The good opportunity when I went there, it really transformed my personality 180 degrees. Because even though I lived in my childhood, but it was only until I reached 10 years old. But over there, I was in a college stage. So when I went there, I mingled with different nationalities, different religions, and over there, I met a lot of Israelis, a lot of the Jewish Americans taught me in the university, and my classmates were from Israel, and a lot of them were Jewish Americans. So I get to know a lot about it, which is totally different misconceptions that we got in Saudi Arabia through the textbooks, through the stereotypes, through everything. So that really changed a lot of my views, and also from the other nationalities. So that's why I believe that from that point, that education is more than just getting a degree. Education is where you mingle with people, with developing your personality. It's not only a certificate. If it is a certificate, you can get it even from home, virtually, especially these days. But the different kinds of people that you get, and this is where your personality develops. Over there, when you are just close to certain nationalities and certain religions, No matter how many degrees you get, you're still narrow-minded. But I had the chance to mingle with a lot of nationalities, and I didn't constrain myself like other Saudi women over there to only Saudis, because most of the Saudis, when they go there, they go to the same loop. So even though they have the opportunity to gain education and live there, I'm not saying all of them, but a big percentage of them just to stay with among each other's and visit each other's. But I didn't constrain myself with that. I mingled with a lot of nationalities. My friends were from all over, from Europe, from Spain, like Spain, Italy, call it like all Europe, and from Turkey, from Iran, from all over the world. And I wasn't hesitant to mingle with any nationalities and with even other religions. In the beginning, let me tell you frankly, that because of a lot of the misconceptions that we got, for example, when I see like a Jewish person wearing the traditional and religious, I was scared in the beginning. But then after that, I said, what kind of misunderstanding that I had, at that time. And then after that, from my professors, from my classmates, I changed all of this kind of fear that I had and suspect that I had. Honestly, without having the chance going to the States, I will never be the same person that I am with you right now. So yes, I got a degrees. I got 2 bachelors, I got 2 degrees, but to me, the true education was, and the sophistication that I got through these kind of opportunities. Then after I finished my degrees, like my second master's, I didn't work.
You were only 2 master's degrees?
Yeah, one in computer information system, and the other one is in health promotion, disease prevention.
Wow.
And then after I had the chance to continue my PhD because my father was political analyst in the embassy, and all the sons and daughters of diplomats have free scholarships. That's why I get all of these degrees, because I'm paid. They pay me every single thing. And honestly, I have to thank my government, because without them, I will never be able to get all of those degrees and to be educated in the best universities in the world. I'm so thankful to them for that. And I even had the chance to continue my PhD, and they told me, look, we will pay you everything. And all my father's friends at that time told me, go for it. I told them I had enough of education. I want to work. I want to see the real world. I'm not going to be a professional student my whole life, and I need to work, because I don't know what I'm going to do in my PhD, what I'm going to major, because I have very diverse background. I have English literature, I have science, health science, I have a computer information system, and I have health promotion. So I will do my PhD in what? It will be really disappointing after you continue 4 or 5, 6 years, then you say, oh, this is not the major that I want to be. I'm not going to be interested. This is not where I want to work. So I had the chance to work in the World Health Organization. Mainly, it's called PAHO, Pan American Health Organization. It was based in DC. And I worked there for 2 years, and then I worked in the human resource department. It's called HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So I spent a couple of years working in the States. A lot of people told me, you have the chance to work in the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. I told them, no, I want to be exposed to the Americans. I want to see how those people work. I know I will have the chance to work in the Saudi embassy, but I'm going to be so tightened with the same group. And I want to see and I want to know the Americans. I want to know more than just the students and professors. I want to know the true life of Americans. So I had this chance to work 5 years in the States, 6 years. And then after that, my dad said, we finished. We have to return back. Where to go? As many Saudis, whenever they finish and live for many years in the States, they choose UAE. Because UAE is a mix. It's like it's cosmopolitan. It's not typical Arab, and it's not also typical European or Westerner. So you can choose the lifestyle that you like. So that's why my dad picks, and all of us encourage him for this choice. And
So
it was an excellent choice.
UAE?
Well, from 2003. but we went back and forth. We went to Canada, then we went back to Saudi Arabia, then we returned back here. I lived in a lot of places, but the base was UAE. And then after that, when we returned back to Saudi Arabia, I had the chance to work in the Islamic Development Bank. It was the Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah. It's like the World Bank in Washington, D.C., but it's mainly constrained for Muslim countries. So at that time, they have excellent library. I was spending, like you could say, like 24, most of my time, in my free time, I didn't go to the lunch break. I go to the library because I was planning to do my PhD. I said, now I had the chance after working in Saudi Arabia, after working in DC, and even I worked in UAE before I get my PhD. I worked in the media city. Okay, so I said, what? And even when I worked at PAHO and at the World Health Organization, I was working under the communication and media department. So most of my job was basically between communication and development. And when I even went to Saudi Arabia, before going to the IDB, Islamic Development, I was working in the American Embassy in Saudi Arabia. And I was in the public diplomacy department. But then I had an excellent choice in the Islamic Development Bank, and it's more into development. So I mixed development, diplomacy, and communication. And then I start to write my proposal. So I go to the library of the IB and I start to write my proposal. I showed my proposal to a couple of American professors whom I met in the American embassy. They told me, your best choice, not the US. Since you're doing development for the Middle East and Arab media, your best choice is UK. Honestly, I was afraid to go to the UK because I'm not used to it. I don't know how I'm going to live there.
And because the food's horrible. And the food's horrible. Let's just be honest.
Well, it's not the main thing for me. I can find my way for food. And then, and I was lucky enough also to meet the British ambassador and the British council. And they introduced me to a lot of universities in London, specifically in London. I remember the British CG, Consul General. I met him in London. I met him first in Jeddah, and then I met him in London, and he showed me all the universities. He told me, please change from the US. Now it's about time to do your PhD here. And the professors, my American, the American professors that I know, gave told me that it's better to contact British professors. They told me, go to Naomi Sakr. Naomi Sakr, she's the best professor in your field. I sent her my proposal. She said, go ahead, and we will do you. We have to make an interview for you because your proposal is so interesting.
So what did you end up writing about? What did you end up writing your PhD about?
I was writing about the role of Arab satellite television in social development, mainly women's development in Saudi Arabia. And
so we're gonna come back to that topic because it's an interesting topic that we can tie in here with the changing perceptions. And what are you doing these days? You're in Dubai or you're in Abu Dhabi?
Currently, I'm still in Abu Dhabi.
Okay. And what are you doing these days out there? What are you doing these days in Abu Dhabi?
Oh, okay. I'm currently doing my independent studies. I'm working with doing a study with the Middle East Forum, working on the study about Abraham Accord and the impact of it on Emiratis, especially Emiratis. So this is the study that. Yeah, I'm gearing here into the social perspective from different angles.
And what's your favorite kind of food?
Well, I have a lot of favorite food. It's a very difficult question because of the multi background that I had. I like Italian food. I like Persian food. I like Turkish food. I like American food. I like all kinds of food. I like Lebanese food. I like Egyptian food. I like Saudi food, and where I come from, specifically from my West Coast, from Medina. I'm proud of our cuisine.
Awesome. So I want to get to this guy with the awesome shirt in the middle.
You're going to tell us about that shirt.
How you doing, man?
Guys, sorry, I just muted my mic. It's just I didn't want any echo to go through or anything,
good.
you know. Yeah. Oh, sorry. What was the question? I forgot.
Tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Okay.
Where you're from? Where did you get that shirt?
So, okay, guys. First of all, you know what? I wish I'm not doing my introduction after Dr. Najat because I feel quite embarrassed right now. Like I didn't do anything with my life because
I'm embarrassed.
So, mashallah, she's so well accomplished. I'm like, okay, why do you have me here? I might as well just go and chill in my South Beach in Miami here. Let's, you know, she's awesome, mashallah, Dr. Najat.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
I'm lost for words. I'm like, oh God, I feel like, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna like what I'm gonna say because my experience. Okay, well, I'll get to my experience, but let me just say who I am very quickly. So, Umar Busaidi, I'm from the UAE. Currently, as most of you already know, I'm a Fulbright scholar doing my master's in international affairs and intelligence at Florida State. I did my undergrad in marketing at the American University in Dubai. I did do a lot of things on the side as well. I'm also an entrepreneur. So I do have a company in the UAE. Thank you. Oh yeah, I also published a book. I'm an author. I published a book called Just Read It. Don't ask me what it's about.
Just read it.
Just read it.
Thank you very much. Some people get the pun, some other people don't understand it. Anyways, whatever. So my point is, I did my bachelor's and everything, but I was always also an entrepreneur on the side. So I tried setting up an advertising agency, communications, so something close to what Dr. Najat just talked about. And I also heard about her because I used to kind of be like I used to go as a speaker to Zayed University, and I always heard Dr. Najat's name around all the time, Dr. Najat, you know? So I'm telling you, I can attest to her reputation. And also Flora, I think she has some experience in communications. So then I did that, and then I had a clothing store. I had a shop selling women's dresses and wedding gowns, and it was a horrible experience because I was next to a Lebanese restaurant. Nothing to do with Lebanese food. I love Lebanese food.
Good
but
food.
I had freaking pests entering the shop and scaring the girls from the dressing room, and then they stopped coming to my shop.
And your clothing foray into clothing ended with that.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it didn't go too far. I think I should be dressing the cockroaches more than the women. I would probably be more successful. Anyways, so then after that, I had a company, consulting company, helping. So it was called Connections Middle East. So literally, my job was supposed to connect people from around the world, business people who want to do business in the UAE, and I have a lot of contacts in the Gulf in general. So I would always do the connections, but with the financial crisis hit, it shut down, and then I closed that company down. But now I have an events company. So this events company, we've been around for the last 8 years.
Perfect for COVID.
Make sure it's not any Lebanese restaurants.
No, I won't. So we have an events company and in the UAE, and we have a branch in Saudi Arabia. So my partners are from Khobar. And I love my partners. They're awesome. And we did do quite a number of projects in Saudi for the government as well. We have some projects coming up soon, inshallah. So we're happy with that. And you know, I love my Saudi people. I mean, I'm rocking this design. It's from a brand called House of Sinmar. My friend Hamid Dabour, he designed this. So I'm just supporting. A lot of people here in the States ask me where I get my clothes from. And a lot of the times I try to support like local, you know, Saudi talents. But the closest that I've gotten with Israelis has been mostly in Mykonos, Miami, Ibiza, LA, New York. So I usually party. I don't care. I'm going to say, listen, this is informal. So yes, I would hang out and chill with these guys. You meet them in places like this. So I was like, is this what the Israelis are about? Because what we see on TV is a whole different story. But then I would go there and I'm in Ibiza or Mykonos.
That's like half of Israel. If you've been in all the places you've listed, you've met half of everyone that's
I
here.
know. And then when I meet them, I'm like, hello. So I had a very different experience with the Israelis in that perspective. But anyways, I'm just going to cut short my introduction.
Well, I was about to say, and you were just appointed as a non-resident fellow.
Oh yeah, yes. I apologize. I'm a non-resident fellow at Trends. And I also I also do have another role. I mean, I'm also a member of the US UAE Public Affairs Committee, which is an offshoot of AmCham in Abu Dhabi. I did do a lot of work with them and lobbying work in the Hill up there where Haitham is right now in Washington, D.C. And I also was a global shaper with the World Economic Forum in Abu Dhabi. So yes, I also had some serious things, guys, like Haitham and Najat. Like, I'm not just crazy and having fun,
Don't
but
let the shirt fool you.
I just veered off a bit. I'm just telling you about my experience with the Israelis. That's what happened. But I did have some very serious positions as well.
That's a very unique kind of Israeli who goes to Mykonos and Miami and those kind of. You'll meet hopefully, inshallah, you'll meet very different kinds of Israelis here.
I can't wait to go to Tel Aviv. I heard the scene is different there, so we'll see.
Okay, so we're going to try to do two things in this conversation, and we already kicked it off, by getting to know you guys and your experiences. Kind of, these are not typical experiences. You'll tell us in a second, but we want to say we're trying to do a live event today, and we got a lot of people tuning in. I can see them on Facebook Live. And so if our friends watching on Facebook Live or our friends from the Israel UAE forum, who many of whom are tuned into this through the various platforms, want to send in questions or comments throughout, we will try to incorporate them into this conversation. So take us to, we're going to try to do two things. So we're going to try to weave in the personal and then kind of step out of yourself, and we're going to try to reflect on national or regional moods, because it's interesting. All five of us here, we are from certain places, but we're in different places right now. Okay, none of us are in the same places where we're originally from, and some of you guys have also spent a significant amount of time going around to also other places. So you all have different perspectives that I think are very useful as both analysts, but also enrich our experience as people.
Yeah.
So let's start with Haitham. If you want to kick us off, take us to the day before we all found out about this accord. Okay, and you're Egyptian originally. You've been living in the States, and Egypt has had a peace treaty, a stable peace treaty with Israel for a long time. What is kind of the Egyptian view, if you can give sort of a generic kind of Egyptian view of the region, Israel in that place? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Where are the threats coming from? How does, when an Egyptian, the kind of, let's say the kind who reads a newspaper, and is generally aware of what's going on in the region and the world, what is the worldview? Like, who's who?
Clarify this question before the peace accord, right, or after?
Yeah, before the UAE Israel Abraham Accords was announced. Yeah, like the day before, the month before, whatever.
So that the general Egyptian view of that is yes, peace happened after war, and it was great to have peace. Because the country got the chance to develop a good relationship with the United States, which was the vision of President Sadat back then when he foresaw that the American-Soviet relations is going to be going in favor of the American side. But in order for normalization to happen, the Palestinian issue has to be solved first. This was the main key thing, and not only it was the Egyptian standpoint, it was the Egyptian among many officials in different Arab capitals.
But I think even your President Sadat, when he came to the Knesset and he spoke, I mean, that was one of the things that he made very clear. He was one of the first people to stand on that stage and say, we're making peace, but our desire is to see a peaceful resolution of the Palestinian issue.
Exactly.
Which was something that he could say in that position and at that time, and people listened to it. But since then, it's we haven't seen a lot of momentum in that area. So, I mean, that must also affect the way that Egyptians view the relationship. Yes.
Yes, I was going through it actually. I was taking step by step. So yes, to start from the official standpoint, is the Palestinian issue still not solved? So we cannot normalize relations, and it cannot get extended beyond the policy level and the little economic relations between the few people from here and there, with the approval of the Egyptian government. The second point is Egypt has lots of intellectuals, newspapers, TV stations, and media stations that are broadcasted all across the Arab world. And I would argue even until today, even though things are changing a little bit in the region, but still the media and intellectuals and things like that are controlled by a way or another by the Egyptian side. And so the TV shows on a regular basis highlights the conflict between Egypt and Israel. And I think this was one of the key things, So yes, the Palestinian issue is still not solved, but still from the Egyptian-Israeli perspective, the Egyptian side still highlights the wars, the conflict, and how it's going to be continuing. Even though the two sides agree on regional things, President Sisi and Prime Minister Netanyahu agree on political Islam is the major threat, the perception toward Iran, the perception toward instability and the destruction of states and things like that. But inside the country, Israel is still viewed in a certain way. And this will take me to how is that affecting the country after the peace accord. I think the peace accord between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel and Sudan is making by Cairo had a leverage in DC circles because it is the strongest military. It is the first Arab country to sign a peace deal with Israel, and all of a sudden now you have other Arab countries coming into the equation with amount of wealth, lots of money, lots of technology. And as we can see, people-to-people interactions are happening and taking place momentarily right after the peace accord was announced. So I think Cairo looks at that and is a little bit nervous about that. One, how are they going to be preserving their standing among Washington policy circles? Second, how are they going to be, because the government is still skeptical of people-to-people normalization, because unlike the Gulf, why is that?
Why did people-to-people never happen? I remember years ago, and Haitham and I were both at one point or another at the Washington Institute. I was just an intern there, but you actually stayed on as a researcher. And I remember one of the few meetings we had was with an Egyptian intellectual. He was a poet, Ali Salem, and he's passed away. He was, from what I understood, he was a giant, figure. And I got to meet him, and he spoke to us, and I actually read his book. I have it here on my shelf, Rihla Israel, a visit to Israel. And after the peace accord, you read it?
Yeah, I read it.
And he got in his car and he drove to Israel, and he was going to try to do normalization, and it never happened. So do you have a sense why normalization never happened?
Yes, I just wanted to share with you and my Saudi and Emirati friends a funny story. If you're an Egyptian and you go to Israel, you will always have a fun experience when you deal with the Palestinians or Arab citizens of Israel, because they will accuse you for normalization, treason, blah, blah, blah. But also, one of the first things when they hear the Egyptian dialect, they remember an Egyptian play that was produced in the early 1970s called Madrasat al-Mushaghbin, the School of Troublemakers. And it's on Netflix, by the way, if you want to see it.
Oh, yeah.
So once they hear the Egyptian accent, they start repeating scenes. They start repeating different sentences, different jokes from this play. And this is one of the things I used to tell them in the university atmosphere for the socialist and Nazarist and communist Arab Israeli students or Palestinian students in Jerusalem, that, the guy who makes you laugh every day and smile every day is the biggest normalizer. Say, how so? I say, the guy who wrote it is Ali Salem. And he is the guy who came, one of the first Egyptians to come to Israel in 1994 and write a book about it. So just a little bit of a story about that. So going back to your, so could you say that question again? Because I just was excited about Ali Salem.
It was just basically what happened that normalization never happened.
Yeah, why did it never take off? Was it an active government effort to stop it, or was it just the lack of encouragement? Or how come the momentum we're seeing now with Emiratis we never saw in the past 40 years from Egypt, even though you can literally drive between Cairo and Tel Aviv?
I think it's a combination of three things. First, let's start with the people, okay? You have to understand that in every Egyptian, almost Egyptian household, they have somebody they lost in the war against Israel, either in 48, 56, 67, and 73, you know? So this is a trauma for many people. Even when I grew up as a child there, you know, right across the street, I could hear stories about people, oh, this guy lost his dad, this guy lost his uncle, even in my family, you know, in the war, you know? So this is a very psychological barrier for many people. This is one thing about the people level. Second, about the media and the intellectuals.
Sorry to interrupt you, Haitham. Is that still correct for people who are younger and who don't personally remember the wars? The people since 1953?
I'm gonna answer it through the continuation of the answer. I will get it. Okay. And then you go to the intellectuals, the media, you know, newspapers and media, TV anchors. When they talk about Israel, they tend to talk about it in a certain way, and mostly negative. Why is that? Because some of them either come from a Nazarist or communist or social background, you know, who grew up in the heyday of Arab nationalism, or those who come, of course, from a political Islamist background. Of course, as you see, they see the conflict through a religious prism, and this is also another thing. And then you have the government. I think, according to the Egyptian government law, if you travel to Israel or associated with Zionism, for instance, I think you could get stripped of your citizenship, you could get punished, and there are examples of people who got punished because of that. And this is why I applaud the United Arab Emirates, because most recently, right after the accord, right away, they canceled all these kind of laws. You know, they just signed a peace treaty. They said, okay, fresh start. You know, if you are an Emirati citizen, you do business, you deal with Israelis, and nothing against Zionism, nothing against anything. In the Egyptian case, is still existing till today, and I think this is a trend. So the answer to your question is, people have psychological barrier, but also the government and the intellectuals play a role in the continuations of the cold peace or the non-normalization thing. But among the youngsters, I would argue, yes, there are people still remember, but I wouldn't say it's as aggressive as somebody who grew up in the 60s or 70s or even the 80s or even the 90s or even my generation. When we grew up in the early 2000s, the first thing I understood about politics was the second intifada, and how you see Palestinians are throwing stones and Israeli soldiers are attacking them. So this is embedded in the mentality of many people. But the significance of the Abraham Accords is, if you have a young Egyptian nowadays or a young Arab in this region who's 10 years old or even 12, 13, 14 years old, and just his eyes are just being open to understand the region around him, one of the first things he's going to see is Israel is not the enemy. You know, it's political Islamists, it's the economic problems the region faces, ISIS, the destruction against minorities, and Israel is becoming part of the solution by a way or another, and other Arab states embracing it. So I think this is a positive thing.
That's really interesting. Let's stop right before the announcement of the Abraham Accords and keep it at that level. I'm curious, you know, you told us in the intro, you famously, as an Egyptian, I mean, you don't live there anymore, but you famously came to Israel and studied, and you were kind of well known here that you were an Egyptian guy doing a degree at Tel Aviv University. Did you get backlash from family or friends, either in the kind of American, whether Egyptian or the broader American Arab community that maybe you were a part of? Did people you knew still in Egypt, if you still have family or friends still in Egypt, did they look at you differently? Did they stop talking to you? Was there any kind of backlash you received for this?
I think it happened, like when I decided to come and study in Israel first, it was a secret between me and only my parents, you know, because it's the culture, at least in the Egyptian mentality culture, it's a little bit of a scandal, you know, or it's a big deal. As I said, as explained, many wars, many people lost their relatives and loved ones, and it gets passed from generation to generation. So you cannot just tell your community I'm traveling there. So by the end of my school year at Tel Aviv University, I was selected to be the valedictorian at Tel Aviv University, first Arab.
Congratulations.
And I gave the speech, and they ended up broadcasting the speech live on Egyptian television, you know.
Wow.
And, imagine all my Arab American family community members here or even back in Egypt, they just see you on TV with the Hebrew signs on the podium, you're standing up.
Shit, the cat's out of the bag.
Can we go back to Egypt, or would you be in trouble?
So it was a little bit ironic, you know, because lots of attacks, lots of backlash, lots of criticisms.
Yeah.
And people asked to revoke the citizenship, you know, close to the government, and it created lots of sensitivity. So it was a big issue.
Do you go back to Egypt now, or is it like kind of? made it weird to go home.
It made it weird, you know, because like, first of all, your friends are going to be very scared to talk to you because you don't understand the government position in that, and how are they going to be responsive to your decisions. And for people there, they will be scared, you know. That's an automatic thing, you know. If somebody is doing certain things that out of the box, they will be scared to be associated with it, so they would rather not to talk until they figure the whole thing. And this is again, and this is why I applaud the peace deal between the UAE and Israel, because what I'm seeing, and even Bahrain passing laws to combat anti-Semitism, encourages them to deal with each other. You don't see that with other governments. So I really hope they take this route.
Najat, what about you?
About what?
Take us to Saudi Arabia, if you can, because you know Egypt is in this one place where it signed a peace treaty, but it didn't normalize.
Mm-hmm.
The UAE signed a peace treaty. It kind of maybe even normalized before it signed a peace treaty, we can say. And Saudi Arabia is kind of in this, kind of one of the things Haisa mentioned is that maybe Egypt is kind of sensitive about losing its position as leadership in the world. My words, not his. And Saudi Arabia has kind of been taking over that role of leadership in the world. My sense, you guys can disagree or agree, is that all of these moves are a precursor to Saudi Arabia normalizing ties with Israel. I mean, we're hearing the rumors, Sudan, all these things I think are building up. And you see, at least what's translated into English or Hebrew from the Saudi press, we're seeing that momentum. Take us back, maybe from few years ago, and right before the Abraham Accords were announced. What is the sense in Saudi Arabia regarding Israel, regarding regional views of who's the enemy, who are the threats, who are not the threats, who are the allies? How does Saudi Arabia see the region today? Again, we'll stop before the Accords, and we'll continue with after the Accords are announced soon.
Okay. Let me first take you to my personal experience, then I will take you to the bigger picture. Okay. In my generation, we didn't face and we didn't live the wartime with Israel. Okay, so I didn't expose what my parents exposed, like the loss of 1967 and the other problems that happened. Like my father's generations, their perspective about this conflict is different from my generation and the younger generation. Like in my generation, we grew up that the first threat is Iran. It's not because it was the Khomeini problem. Because since the Khomeini came, he threatened Saudi Arabia.
Around what year are you talking about here? When
that was in the 80s.
Okay.
That was back in the 80s. Even my classmates, because I was in a private school, and all my classmates were from the royal family and from daughters of ministers, and that's what we were talking about. And we never mentioned the word Israel, honestly, in class, because Israel is not our first enemy. Our first enemy is the Iranian regime. And we all agree on that. All the Saudi students. The only differences that we face from the Palestinian students, our classmates. And I remember that time in our English class, we used to have debates in the class. Okay, and the Saudis, whenever they talk about conflicts in the region, the first thing they bring up is the Iranian regime. And the Palestinians say, no, the first thing is Israel. And we had a conflict, I remembered in the class. No, at least Israelis are Jews, and Jews are one of the well-known religions, and it is the others, they are trying to distort our religion. This is one thing. The other thing, who are threatening us, who are threatening Mecca and Medina, who are doing all the problems and conflicts in the Hajj and Umrah. It's not the Israelis. It's that was even back in the late 70s and early 80s. It was all from Iran. And the Iranian regime, I'm not talking about Iran as a country, because the relationship was quite not bad during the Shah period. So, that from personal, my personal perspective and my personal experience. But then later on, with the more complications in the region, definitely the generations are more preoccupied with other issues, like, for example, the employment, the better education. You know, like, even on me personally, I wasn't like really, I've never thought of Israel as the first conflict. I had like, I'm more interested in the social development of Saudi Arabia, like on women's issues. At that time when I was living in Saudi Arabia, women, there was ban in driving. There was like a lot of ban for women. Now things are much, much better. Like all my dreams can come true now. But before, when I was living in Saudi Arabia, there are a lot of restrictions. So I was like more like engaged with these social issues rather than the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And most of my generations are that way. But when I compare it to the previous generations in Saudi Arabia, no, they are different. They were saying, and even the hostility that I see and the aggression that I see in the younger and the older generation is totally different than our generation and the younger generation. The younger generation, no, they're more open, and but it varies.
Let me ask you, Najat, would you say that like your father or someone from your father's generation, would they then view the region differently? Would they see Israel as one of the bigger threats, or has the older generation also managed to shift its views over time and kind of say, okay, maybe we don't like the Israelis, but they're not our top enemy. They're maybe even not our top 5 priority. Like, is there kind of a shift among the older generation too?
Let me tell you, this is a very complicated question. Let me tell you why. Because Saudi Arabia has the most diverse population that I ever seen, even when I compare it to the States. So it varies from which region that you're talking about. So age is a role, and also the background, the cultural background. So people from the Hijaz, for example, is different than people from Najd, is different than the people from the Eastern Coast. Okay, so let me tell you, for example, if someone who's in middle age or even older from Najd will have, I believe, if he's not like coming from a very like very religious background or extremist background, he will be more pragmatic. Okay, he will think, no, Israel is not our first enemy, and like that, and he will be saying we have other problems. So if he's like well educated, westernized, and free from any kind of ideologies, he will be saying that. People from the West Coast, for example, because mainly, most likely, they're coming from different cultural background. They're influenced, especially by Egyptians. So there are a lot of them who are not real. So you will say so the older generations and from the West Coast, maybe they won't like it. They're very close to the Egyptian mentality. Okay, that I'm telling you, this is the general. Not everybody's like that. Sure. The eastern province of Saudi Arabia, because of their sect, okay, they're mainly Shiites, so they are quite influenced by the Iranian regime way of thinking. So you will see, not all of them, of course, but a big majority might be saying, no, they are still our first enemy because they're influenced by what the Iranian regime is broadcasting. Okay, so it's very diverse. But in general, people are fed up of this conflict. In general, okay, that's all over Saudi Arabia, and that's what I was personally thinking of, because this problem is not 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, it has been for decades, and now there are a lot of complications. And honestly, I will tell you, if you want to know the true views of the majority of Saudis in general, watch the interview of Prince Bandar. Prince Bandar, you know, he was the mouthpiece of the Saudis.
Najat, for our listeners who are not familiar with Prince Bandar, who is he? And just give us.
Okay. Prince Bandar was the former Saudi ambassador to Washington D.C., and he was the former national national security advisor. But now he's not. He was a former ambassador and former national advisor. National security. Okay. He was like you can say that Prince Bandar is the hardcore of the Saudi foreign policy, And he was so sophisticated, very shrewd. And his 3 episodes on Al Arabiya channel summarized and was basically reflecting most of the Saudis' views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I wrote even an article about that. I called it the Bandar Monologue and the Gulf New Doctrine. So the main thing out of his interview, to summarize that for the audience, are 3 points. Basically, are in the era of freeing ourselves. I'm talking about the Saudi Arabia and the Arab Gulf. And when I talk about the Arab Gulf, I'm here specifically focusing on UAE and Bahrain and others, but those are the main ones. So now we are on the stage of freeing from all ideologies, okay, and even being sympathizers with the taboo conflicts like the Palestinian conflict. So before what happens, we know that they are doing mistakes. We know that they are losing opportunities, but we couldn't say that to the public arena. Why? Because they are our brothers. They, under the name of Arabism or Islamism, we are trying to cover. But deep inside, we know that they are mistaken. Now we are in the stage of freeing ourselves from being apologists. Okay, this is number 1. Number 2, now we are in the stage of more transparency and honesty. Because if before we can afford being nice and apologists to them under the name of brotherhood and under the name of whatever, now I couldn't afford it because I am in a critical position. I have a lot of problems. I have, I'm surrounded by our national security is threatened by the Iranian regime, by the crazy Erdogan, okay, by a lot of threats, and by also some internal problems in the Arab region. So I don't have the time for you to keep losing opportunities. If you're going to be cooperative with me, I'm going to help you, support you. But if you're going to be losing opportunities and you're going to fight among each other within yourselves, and fight for power and money, and you have a lot of corruption, how can I help you? I don't have the time and the leisure that I had. So this is number 2. Number 2 result of the interview, Prince Bandar. Number 3, we have now a new doctrine in the Arab Gulf. What is the new doctrine? A doctrine is basically now, because we are younger countries, before we were like kind of followers to the older Arab countries because they have more experience. They are older in years. So now we have our own doctrine, which is basically political pragmatism and patriotic nationalism. This is versus to Nasserism and Arab nationalism and Islamism. Okay, I want to highlight there's a big difference between Islamism and Islam. Okay, Islamism is basically you're turning the religion, peaceful religion, to an ideology, and you're using this religion for political agenda. Okay, while Islam is basically like any religion. You practice your rituals and it's peaceful. Okay, why now most of the non-Muslims think that Islam is not peaceful? Because those political Islamists who are playing with religion for their own political agenda. Okay, this is our problem. So now we have our own Arab Gulf doctrine. Okay, so we're not followers anymore. Now we are establishing new
So
things.
we're going to come back to the issue of Islamism in a second, because I think that's going to be a whole round of topics. And we're going to get to Omar in a second and the view from the UAE. Haitham, you wanted to just add a comment on what Najat was saying?
Yes, just quick 2 comments. Nagat said, I think I totally agree with her, and I think one thing the Palestinians are missing these days, they are missing 2 things when they look at the region around them, especially when it comes to the Gulf. One, they ignore the fact that whenever their Arab brothers in the region are having issues with, they go form relations with, so Arab Gulf states have issues with the Iranians, have issues with Hezbollah, have issues with political Islam, have issues with Turkey. They just go right away and form relationships with them, and this is totally makes sense. Doesn't make sense. The second thing, also in the age of social media, where everything is seen instantly and videos could be posted right away. So maybe Gulf leaders back in the 70s and the 60s used to understand and used to know and hear of certain actions and certain slogans the Palestinians say about them. And I mean negative ones, But since the local population in the Gulf didn't see that directly, the leadership in the Gulf maybe didn't worry that much. Okay, we forgive them. Or since nobody knows about it, it's between us, Nowadays, in the age of social media, when a young Gulf citizen who patriotic and proud of his country, proud of his flag, proud of his leadership, and he sees Palestinians burning the flags of his country, burning the pictures and images of his leadership, who in the culture over there, they respect them so much and they respect their flags, and they have their own nationalism too, and this should be respected. And Palestinians just humiliate it and talk about it in a very negative way, and they start asking, I will use a little bit of an example. Just look at what happened with the Emirati officials or the Emirati delegation who visited Al-Aqsa Mosque, and how the Palestinian treated them and talked to them, while you have Turkish delegates all the time go there. Why do you deal with the Emirati delegates like that, and you deal with the other Turkish delegates in a total different way, and you welcome them and you don't mistreat them? And I think this is something is going to be developed more. And I think, and related to Egypt, by the way, this is one thing the Egyptians, I would say, how to phrase it, I think for years, the Egyptian diplomatic missions that used to visit Tel Aviv used to be scared and very scared of the Palestinians to be there, to attend political events, to even be shown when they go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they used to hide, they didn't want to speak, so nobody hear the Egyptian dialect, so nobody comes and attack them. I think
Hassan, was it an issue of embarrassment or safety?
Yes, an embarrassment, and of course safety. But I would say it's more of embarrassment, because also in the mentality of an Egyptian diplomat, when he goes there in college, he studied and Egyptian nationalism and how he saw Israel as an enemy. Now his government asking him to go in a mission to the opposite side. Still, he sees it as an enemy, but he has to fulfill his diplomatic duty and his government duty, But also in the meantime, he sees the Palestinians and he sympathizes with them and he agrees with some of the ideas they have, So it was like a combination of everything. And I think this is something the Palestinians need to take into consideration when they deal with the Gulf. And one last observation, and I noticed it, for years, Egyptian leaders have been attacked. Anwar Sadat is a very hated figure among the Palestinians. You never sit with Palestinians and you see them praising him. And for Egyptians, I'm very surprised. We call him the hero of war and peace. And he was the one who succeeded to get the Egyptian land back through diplomacy and things like that. Palestinians hate him. The interesting thing I see is, at least, and I don't know if this is a positive trend or not and how it's going to be developed in the future, Palestinians never apologized for cursing and attacking Egyptian leaders. With Gulf leaders, this is a little bit changing, Right after the Abraham Accord, we saw Palestinians all over against that, but we started to find some voices that talk about it and then try to tune down the rhetoric and say they are brothers, and this is maybe because of the money, the financial support. So I think this is an area to watch out for, because the Egyptians didn't have that leverage over the Palestinians. I don't know how the Gulfis are going to be using that, especially the competition with the Qataris as well. I'm trying to imagine a future scenario when Abu Dhabi goes to Tel Aviv and have a diplomatic mission there, and they start participating. And unlike, I wrote it in one of my articles, unlike inactive Egyptians and Jordanians, I'm sure the Emiratis are going to be active over there. So what's the counterbalance from the Turkish embassy there? How are the Qataris are going to be escalating against that? And how are the Palestinians are going to be finding themselves between both sides?
So I'm curious to hear Omar's perspective. I mean, I'm sitting in my house in August. I don't remember the date exactly. And we're all like COVIDed out and we don't know what's going on, and life is gloom and doom, and the TV comes on and my wife basically calls me from the other room. She's like, "Penny, you got to come see this." So I walk into the room and it's like, UAE declares, normalization with Israel, historic accords. And I was like, on the one hand, wow. On the other hand, that's not really surprising to me that was going to happen. I've heard two perspectives here from different areas of the region. What was your perspective coming from from the UAE?
Okay, again, would you like my perspective or like the street?
Both.
Okay, so from my perspective, to be very honest, I was not surprised at all. Number one, number two, the reason I was not surprised is because a lot of, one of the reasons that Dr. Najat said she moved to the UAE is it's very cosmopolitan. And the truth is, there were lots of Israelis in the UAE just with a different passport.
Right.
And if they were comfortable enough with you, depending if they knew your personality, and I don't know, for me, for some reason, they were very open with me and they just told me, yeah, you know what, hey, I'm also Israeli and American. And the number of Israeli Americans is like, we have registered in the UAE, if I'm not mistaken, around 150,000 British citizens, around 70 or 80,000 Americans, out of which, just imagine how many of them are Israelis.
Yeah, there's about 500,000 Israeli Americans out there, just so you know.
There you go. So really, I won't be out there to tell you like, oh, it was like that shocking. It wasn't. It was already happening. I mean, and decades. I'm talking about decades. Now, I also, again, the reason why for me, I'm not maybe the best sample size, because I went to a private school my entire life. I grew up in a very metropolitan environment, very diverse environment. So again, I was exposed to them. So I do already have lots of Jewish friends, but then also some of the Jewish friends that I have came out and told me, oh, actually, by the way, I'm also Israeli. And then they told me, oh, their name is actually not this, but it is this. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. Why did you just tell me? I didn't have, they were all like, we were not sure, or we're not, whatever. This is from me, Omar, okay? Now, on the street, I agree with Dr. Najat again on the same point that, we grew up, the major threat for us was Iran. Like on our borders, it was mostly Iran. And we
even going back to when you were a kid?
Yes, and I'll tell you this, the major reason, and if we were to be even more open, and these things are out in the news, there's been several people who we actually were able to catch that were spying for the Iranian government. And the UAE was able to take out people either from the police force, even in the army, that were, you can find all these things are in public. So that was actually our major threat. We never heard of Israel trying to, we did always see that this was the issue there. Yes, I'm going to be honest. When we grew up, I mean, you watch the news, you read the newspaper, there's always that rhetoric, Israelis occupying Palestinian lands, the bulldozing. You'll always see the videos of those bulldozers going through and pushing down the houses. Yeah, we knew this. And then also Palestinians living in the UAE, they would tell us stories about how, one day they woke up and then there was a family, there's an Israeli family in the house, and they were like, what's going on? So they were telling us stories like this. Like, we grew up with those stories. So now there was this whole thing, and as Dr. Najat mentioned earlier about Arabism, and there are Muslim or Christian brothers and sisters and all that thing. But then at the same time, it wasn't something we ourselves could have ever experienced or anything close to that, or because in the end of the day, you come to the UAE, Dan, you're going there tomorrow. And you see how majority of how everybody lives, whether they're Emiratis or not Emiratis, it's a very safe environment. It's very safe, and some people like to say it's a bubble or whatever, because really you could leave your phone on the table, go to the restroom in a restaurant, and come back, it'll still be there.
I don't think I'm going to do that though.
I'm telling you, it is.
You should try it out.
You should try. Put a fake phone and see if it's still there or not. I don't know. Ask maybe someone, Dr. Najat, if they can tell you that. So for me, that's how we grew up, and then I told you, the more traveled we became, because a lot of us who got a chance to study overseas, etc., we did meet Israelis, and they didn't have a gun on our head. We were chilling and we were partying with them and we're having a great time. So now this is it. Now I'll tell you from a professional perspective. I worked for different government agencies in the UAE, and I already knew 100% the deal was going to happen with Israel, because you could see Israeli delegations coming in, you could see Israeli businesses being signed in for certain contracts. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just a matter of time. And then, I don't understand why anybody is even surprised. Israel was going to take part at Expo 2020.
Right.
They were going to be there for 6 months. before even the ministers were announced, before the ministers came, Israel already confirmed 2 or 3 years ago that they were going to take part. There was a huge piece on the paper that Israel's going to take part. So obviously the flag is going to be there. The Israelis are going to be there. So this was okay. The government already prepared us, and also let's not forget, the government was very smart with how to kind of like, if there were people who were brainwashed with a certain narrative from before about, maybe Israel was this aggressor or whatever. We had the Ministry of Tolerance set up. I was actually already shocked. I was like, why in the world do we have a Ministry of Tolerance? The UAE, it's already tolerant. We have all the people all over the world. We have all the nationalities, all religions. I was like, why do we need, I'm like, this does not make sense. We're the last people that need a Ministry of Tolerance and coexistence. We have everything. I'm like, that if you are not somebody with just bare common sense, like the basic common sense, then you definitely did not know that we were definitely going to sign the deal with Israel, because that's what it was. And then, the Pope being invited. So if the Pope was coming, definitely a big rabbi is going to come to the UAE too. So there was all this. I mean, look, if they were targeting certain people who were really like that naive and did not know what's going on, then it worked for them. I hope it did. But with people like us, we were just like laughing. I was like, this is probably, honestly, in my opinion, I don't think it's a very useful ministry, because really, we are already, I'm telling you, we're already tolerant. And we have strict laws in the UAE. If I go and say to somebody, oh, you Palestinian, or you Hindu, or you this, in the UAE, we have strict laws for that. There's already a fine imposed, like 100,000 dirhams plus I don't know how many years in prison. If you say something not about anti-Semitic, anything, xenophobic, or the race, religion, anything, if really? Offline or online.
So how does that like come? Where's the line? Like if I say like I don't like Palestinian food.
No, that's
bad. They make
no, that's yeah.
How can it's good food? Saying like
we don't like
it's like if you say something, I'm to clarify, if you say something malicious about somebody based on their ethnic, religious, gender, whatever it might be, that is an offense, criminal offense.
So let me tell you this. If, for example, if you said something, how there's let me stick to Islam, and somebody is Shia, and if you say something just because somebody is Shia, even though, for example, the major big power, this whole issue between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we're like in with Saudi Arabia and all that, if we say something against, we will get in trouble, because they are Emirati Shias, and it's fine. Like, to each with their own. You believe in this, you believe in that, but you're supposed to respect it. That's the whole point of coexistence. I mean, so if you do say, and there are some people that have been caught who were either saying something against a certain nationality or religion or something, whether online or offline, they would get in trouble. This is what I love and respect about our. So it's not because only putting now anti-Semitism laws, as Haytham mentioned, but also we were like this against anybody who said anything about anything. Because I grew up, I'll tell you, I grew up in school. I had Egyptian teachers. I had a massive back surgery when I was 21. My doctor was Iranian Shia. Okay, the nurses were like Hindus and Christians. I mean, I have my education. My professor is from Israel. I told Dr. Naman Nagar. So how can I have something against anybody with any religion or any faith when they are either healing me, educating me, taking care of me, befriending me, having fun with me? This is what it is to be from the UAE. Interesting.
So, I mean, outside of, for those of us who don't speak Arabic and for those who don't have access to, the array of Arab satellite television, we kind of see glimpses of Al Jazeera, right? That's kind of like the famous one. And Al Jazeera, for those who don't know, is based in Qatar, and maybe one or three of you can talk about kind of the dynamic with Qatar, because it's a kind of in a different place where the UAE and Bahrain are. So what would have been the view of Israel? You say there's a society that ever since you've been a kid, at least, has been very tolerant and preached tolerance and even stopped people who were being intolerant.
Yeah.
What would you have seen on TV growing up? For the Emirati who's not in a private school with people from all over the world, for the Emirati who didn't travel the world and go to university, what would have been the view of Israelis, growing up?
Yeah, well, okay. It's interesting that because you brought up Al Jazeera, and I'll be honest. Look, you know what? First of all, I don't watch Arab news, and the reason is I don't know. I don't like the way the content is delivered in Arabic at all. You know, I don't like to address that audience or whatever, and I do feel there's some sort of a biased narrative that comes out of stuff like that comes. And I'll tell you why. Watch Al Jazeera Arabic and watch Al Jazeera English. It's not like Al Jazeera English is too far off from Al Jazeera Arabic, but Al Jazeera Arabic, and especially they have this Al Jazeera Bashir, which has like Yusuf Qaradawi there, like goes live and says all his stuff. And I was like, what? Because in Al Jazeera English, they don't put that stuff. You don't see the same. So imagine all those people that like you just said, Dan, the ones who did not go to private schools, the one who did not study overseas or not exposed. You know, I love what Dr. Najat was saying, how she made sure she does not put herself in a closed environment with certain people. She want to expose herself with people from everywhere. So those people, I do pity them because, yeah, they do have one sort of narrative. And also you have to know that one of the biggest enemies that we were fighting, forget Iran, it was the Muslim Brotherhood. They infiltrated our system in a big way. And particularly the curriculum in the government schools and the UAE as well. So the government, like, you know, once we took them out of their roots and took them out of their holes, they did a massive, you know, you could say like sort of like educational revolution in the country with the curriculum and everything else. So yes, I think again, maybe, you know, with the Ministry of Tolerance and stuff, this was kind of maybe targeted to them, not to the people like us who were fortunate to go to private school. And look, we are lucky, and I feel you know, sorry for my friends in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, because Egypt's got like 100 and something million population. Saudi Arabia is like 30 million, but we're like 1 million. So it was easy for us to kind of quickly get in there and fix it up, and everybody is ready.
Do you think because it's so small that it can, I mean, obviously because it's so small, it can implement such changes much faster?
Absolutely.
You see it, maybe this would be an interesting question for all three of you. Is the UAE seen as sort of kind of like the R&D lab of the Arab world today, socially, technologically, economically, religiously? And this is going to lead to the next question. Like, I'm curious as to if is the UAE seen as an outlier, or is it seen as the R&D hub?
I would say yes for both, but then I'll let Dr. Najat and Haitham continue.
I think Omar, I think Haitham wanted to say something. No?
Please.
Just like Omar said, I agree with many things he said about the United Arab Emirates. I recently was there for almost like 8 months, and a few things that really surprised me, because also another thing, if you grew up in Egypt and you tend to watch the drama and the TV stations, you look at the Gulfis in a certain way, you know, I'm a big TV guy, you know, so TV shaped my views about many things around me in the region, you know. So when I first made the decision to go to the United Arab Emirates and live there for a bit, the first question, two questions, you know, how are they going to look at you as Egyptians? Because we always hear Gulfis tend to treat Egyptians in a certain way. And second, also, I have educational credentials from Israel. And to my surprise, the two of them did not affect that. I still remember one of the things that really surprised me when I went to the airport in Abu Dhabi, you know, the guy just said welcome, even greeted me in English, you know, stamped my passport, and I was in right away. Even when you go to restaurants and there is an Emirati person comes, it happens you coming to enter the restaurant, and he's entering the restaurant. He said, no, please go ahead. You know, even one time I remember I finished work and I was in the elevator, and I entered the elevator. There were many Emiratis there dressed in the traditional dress. Of course, you could tell from my curly hair and the style that I'm Egyptian. And they started to sing me Egyptian songs, you know, it was like the very funny ones, you know, but I didn't talk to them. I didn't greet them. I don't know them, but they could tell I'm Egyptian, and they sing to me in my local dialect, you know.
You know, Haitham, I want to just say, it's because, look, with Egyptians, we love them because they're either like, they're jokes. They're you know,
when they have sense of humor.
Exactly, they have a nice sense of humor. Like no matter how serious and how crazy it is on Egyptian streets, they still make jokes about it. Like all our memes on our phones and Instagram and everything, it's always like some Egyptian comment, you know, Adri Imam and, you know, whoever.
Agree. And even like last January, I still remember I was just reading the newspapers and I found that they passed a law in the United Arab Emirates that is gonna criminalize and it could lead even to discharge from the country if you attacked another religious beliefs and I was like, what? Am I living in an Arab country now? You know, and it was like it was an amazing experience for me that I went there and I witnessed such things because it changed my views and it gave me some hope about the region and things could be changing. And in regards to Israeli Emiratis, I think in my personal experience, I was lucky also to witness some of the relationship and how it was being developed. And I think one thing I appreciated about the Emirati culture, and Omar said it, Emiratis are like 1 million, tiny minority, so a small number. So this is easy for them and makes them flexible. But it's all about respect and appreciation, you know. And I was very surprised, you know, they always respect those who come to their country, no matter the religion or ethnicity or how they look like. And they appreciate the services and the contributions they are making to the society. And this is why no surprise that many people want to go there and continue live there for the rest of their lives, you know. And I think they're trying to do something in the United Arab Emirates law to give citizenship to people to stay longer if you're loyal to the country and you like it. So just just a few thoughts.
Add one thing on Haytham's point. You know, Dan, you need to understand one thing, guys. In the UAE, we have a very, 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 I believe, unique relationship between our rulers and the people. You know, it's almost, it's parental leadership. Like our leaders, we look at them as equal as our parents. I'm telling you, it's really crazy, like how we look at them. We really, really love them. And even the way our leaders address us, they say, "Ayali," like my children, you know, "Ya ayali, ya akhwani, ya ayali," you know, and they talk to, by the way, a lot of the times talk not only to the citizens, even to the rest of the people living there, because their leaders really do appreciate the rest of the people that live there, you know. Even Abu Dhabi was, the architect was, you know, Egyptian as well, who played a big role in helping to design Abu Dhabi. So you're talking about, and even if you look at the minister Zaki Nusseibeh, who's originally, you know, comes from Palestine as well, and you know, is made minister, and so we're not ashamed to talk about these people who played a huge role in developing our country. So again, when our leaders they ask us to behave in a certain way, to behave as global citizens with global values and principles, we make sure that we would be the best versions of ourselves when we meet people from other places. Because if Haytham or Dr. Najat now goes and says to the police or to the sheikhs that, oh, there's this Emirati I met, Umar or whoever, that was bad or rude to me, trust me, they will take action against me.
Interesting.
Najat, how do you feel about, like, is there kind of a sense maybe in the Saudis that like, that the UAE is kind of like your R&D hub of social, political, religious kind of trends, and kind of, okay, let's let them do it first, then we'll see how it goes, and then we'll kind of, you know, take it from there? Is there kind of that kind of feeling?
Well, it is more than that. Let me tell you, I'm not going to say that changes are happening in Saudi Arabia is driven out of UAE, but the UAE has a big influence, honestly. The main influence, and that's what even the government, the Saudi government recognized. They felt they are losing a lot of the fortune of the country. The fortune of the country is the people. So Saudi Arabia is paying billions of dollars to educate Saudis in the best universities in the world. And then most of those graduates, and instead of going back to Saudi Arabia, they go to UAE. If they choose to go to any Arab country, they will definitely choose UAE. They won't go anywhere else unless they choose, for example, to stay in the States or in Europe. That's something else. But if they want to go back to the Middle East, most of them go to UAE. So here, like, the government starts to think what I'm going to be doing in order to change all of that. And when we are blessed and have MBS, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, okay, Prince Mohammed bin Salman already has the vision, okay? He has the vision. But when he wants to implement it, he should be seeing another country that already implemented it, okay? So he implemented, when he tried to implement it, he and see the role model of UAE, and he wasn't even embarrassed to say that. He said, since I was back many years ago. I always say that Mohammed bin Rashid is the role model, and I want our country to follow the same model. He wasn't even embarrassed to say that. He said that in a conference. So because they see it. Before, when we talk about the United States or Europe, they keep saying to us, those are far countries with different cultures, with different religions. But now we have a successful country, and it's implementing all of that. And it is not only Arab; it is an Arab Gulf. So they are close from us geographically, culturally, religiously, traditionally. So why we don't try to be this follow the same path, since they're doing that? So and it worked fine in Saudi Arabia. A lot of things happened. Years ago they said if we allow women to drive, there's going to be a lot of backlash. If we open up the country and we open movie theaters and plays, people will backlash. But they opened up the country. Nothing of this happened at all. Things went smoothly. And thank God we have such a neighbor to us like that, because I always believe that the countries get influenced by their neighbors, and we are lucky enough to have such a neighbor. But I want just to please comment on Al Jazeera, because I wrote a lot about Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, basically, let me tell you, in the Arab world, whenever you want to get a legitimacy, you go and do it through two things, okay, which is I consider it as the outdated ideologies or identities, which is Arab nationalism and Islamism. Okay. After the coup that happened in Qatar back in '95, when the son Hamad bin Khalifa rebelled against his father. Okay, a lot of Arab countries, and mainly Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other Arab countries, didn't believe in him. So he wants to prove his legitimacy. And in order to do that, what he will be doing, he started to think about an Arab satellite television. So he brought a lot of scholars, or you call them experts or whatever, who are dominated by the ideologies of Arab nationalism and Islamism. So basically, those who are running the Al Jazeera are not from the Gulf, and are not Qataris. The Qataris are only paying the money, but the backbrain of Al Jazeera is basically, as you see, Palestinians, Egyptians, and Egyptians are mostly are from the Muslim Brotherhood, and all of those people who are coming from ideologies. That's why when we, as people from the Arab Gulf, see it, we see it as a strange satellite television, because it's not representing any of our values as it's like a strange and they are in the Arab Gulf, as Omar said, we do respect a lot our governments. We think of it as a member of our family. We're not doing that because out of fear, because we think, like a lot of people say, do you agree with the name of the nationality? A lot of Arabs are asking me, you're named after a Saudi after a royal family. I tell them I'm proud, because I grew up with those people. I never felt that my classmate is a princess, or she's arrogant or showing up. We were like laughing together, joking together, like members of our family. So when they call me Saudi, okay, so fine. I'm not offended by that. So this kind of concept is actually not understandable by even many Arabs. They think we are so subordinate. They think we are like obeying, or we are getting along with our with our governments because out of fear. They couldn't, understand the respect and the intimate relationship. Al Jazeera didn't respect this kind of value. So you see a lot of insult against our rulers. This is not an Arab Gulf tradition. When you insult the ruler, they call it freedom of speech. We call it insult. We call it disrespect. This is against our values. So nothing of Al Jazeera is representing is basically representing the Arab Gulf. That's, we tried to be apologists to it in the beginning. We tried to say, okay, let us handle our own brothers. They are from the Gulf. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then we are fed up. That's why now there's no diplomatic relations in the 2017. But it didn't come out of a sudden. It came like it was accumulated throughout the years, and all what now most of the people didn't understand what is behind Al Jazeera. Now they're trying to understand it. But I boycott Al Jazeera since 2003 because I noticed that their aim is not only a media. They're trying to overthrow the regimes in the region and to substitute it with Islamists, radical Islamists. So what happened in the Arab Spring, I was predicting that, and I wrote about it back in the early 2000s. And it wasn't a surprise to me when it happened in what is called the Arab Spring. I said, those people are not looking for democracy as they're trying to deceive the people. They're not looking for freedom of speech. They want Islamists to rule. And that's why I'm, as a woman, and Arab women and Saudi women who fought all her years for women's rights and women's empowerment, I don't want this to happen. That's why I was against Al Jazeera, because it will damage everything I'm running and I was looking for. I don't want radical Islamists to rule us. This is not democracy. I would rather, I'm happy with what I have. We are the mentality of the Arab Gulf, just to distinguish it from others. We are evolutionary. We have evolutionary mentality, not revolutionary mentality. We like to progress.
What's your sense, Najat? What's your sense of the, if it was possible, and maybe it is possible, and we're just not aware of it here, because, I think our concept of, like we said, and we've talked about this privately, Omar and I were talking about this privately, and we've talked about this a little bit in this session, concepts of government legitimacy, democracy, we often hear, and certainly in the West, approach democracy and legitimacy from certain constructs and concepts. And you guys are saying, in the Arab Gulf, at least, because of the tradition of monarchies that have a different kind of connection. This isn't like a dictatorship, you're saying. This is like more of a parental type of relationship. If you could take a poll, a real honest, anonymous poll of everyone, how many people would be happy with, the kind of lifestyle and the kind of relationship between the people and the government right now?
In Saudi Arabia, you're talking, or in general?
In
Saudi Arabia? In Saudi Arabia, honestly, I haven't done a study. I haven't conducted a study about that, but I'm going to tell you from my own perspective out of that. I talked even to Shiites. I talked to different population in Saudi Arabia. All of them, they're saying, even the ones who are against, who are not 100% with the government, they want the government. Why? Because they know they will never get the stability that they're gonna get with the current government. Okay, Saudi Arabia is so big country, and honestly, I'm not saying that out of being nice or the fact that it was united in one country is a miracle. King Abdulaziz did a miracle because this country is so diverse. When you go and visit the West region of Saudi Arabia, is not related in any way to the East province culturally and socially. The fact he united it in one country, this is a miracle. So God forbid, if something happened, anything politically, it will be a disaster. It will be divided. It will be chaos, not only to Saudi Arabia, to the whole region. Because what this government is doing, nobody can appreciate it unless he is from the country. So I met a lot of people are saying, even if we disagree in certain points, we want them. Because this is how we can gain our respect. This is how we can gain our stability. This is how we can gain even our prosperity. So it is a big percentage is supporting the government. It's a big percentage. I assure you of that. And unless those who are thinking about their individual interests, this is something else.
So I kind of want to bring the conversation back towards, Israel's role in what's going on. I mean, now we're in a place where, all of you have expressed very deep and passionate perspectives of each's country's positions, as well as the desire for each country to be sustainable and to live in security. And part of forging and building relationships with Israel in the region is based on the same stability. We're a country that's here. We're strong. We're not going anywhere. We seek to be a part of the region, a natural part of the region. I'm kind of going to go somewhere else with this. As the U.S. pulls back from its boots on the ground region, where you see less and less American involvement in terms of military intervention or presence here,
and that's bipartisan.
Bipartisan. There's the Americans no longer want to fight wars in the Middle East, at least in this period of time. Are there expectations in your countries or in the Gulf in general that, should something happen vis-a-vis Iran or external threats to the region, that Israel could or would be expected to fight alongside your countries or on behalf of your countries to defend the order in the region?
Of course, we're taking this, way down the road, certainly with the UAE, and we're trying to think ahead, like how deep could this relationship be? And Saudi Arabia is not there yet, but behind the scenes, we know there's cooperation. We've heard it in the news. With the UAE, we know there's been cooperation. Everyone's scared of Iran, right? And
I'm not afraid.
You should be. Iran is the big threat as far as we're concerned. I know Iran is the biggest threat as far as the UAE and Saudi Arabia are concerned. Is there ever, could you imagine where overtly, not just covertly, where overtly you can see Israel cooperating militarily with your countries against an Iranian threat?
I know. I think. Can I just answer this if it's okay with everybody? Yeah. I think it would. I told just to tell everybody here, I told Dan earlier that this Israeli martial arts Krav Maga, it's Israel, UAE soldiers are already been training in this form of martial arts by Serbian officers. Serbian military's been coming to the UAE training them. I had my trainer who was training me in the gym, who was Serbian, who was telling me that's what he was doing. So I was like, oh, I'm sure this is going to happen. So
there's like a whole class of Serbian Krav Maga instructors in the
Serbian
UAE.
Military teaching Israeli martial arts to UAE military.
Yeah, and by the way, we also have a center in Dubai as well. There's a Krav Maga center in Dubai. Just to let you know, you can Google it. You'll find it. They have a website. They have an Instagram account. They have all that. So
anyone who wants to learn Krav Maga, I'll be there tomorrow. Happy to teach anybody.
Yeah. So to give you, that's just one insight. But of course, in terms of we already know with cybersecurity and so many other different security infrastructure in the UAE, we already get a lot of that work with Israel, and we already announced that even the time when the Abraham Accords was announced, everybody saw those contracts being signed by the government. So that's a no-brainer. When the chief of the Mossad was there meeting with Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed, it was the head of our national security. We already saw that was going to happen. So I know that there will be a lot more military probably drills in the future. I can foresee that. My dad, who God rest his soul, who used to work in the army for over 30 years, used to tell me a lot about how Israeli military capabilities were and everything. So to counter Iranian threat, I'm definitely sure that even though the U.S. is withdrawing from the region, Israel would be a great partner to counter that threat from Iran. So I don't doubt that at all.
Do you think you could? I mean, there would be blowback because we know, let's go back 30 years or 40 years now, 30 years, and the world's vastly different now. But when Saddam Hussein was firing rockets on Israel in 91, the U.S. had to tell Israel, sit aside and don't fire back at Iraq because we want to maintain our Arab coalition. And so, I mean, like I'm trying to imagine, Benny was trying to imagine, we talked about this, like if there's a possible future, and probably not tomorrow, it starts with drills, it starts with this, but God forbid there's some kind of military conflict. I mean, you could see like Israeli soldiers or Israeli jets coming to help the UAE in the Gulf. Like that's an insane kind of thought, but I mean, that might be the world we're coming to. Haitham, you wanted to jump in?
Two comments. The first comment is regarding Egypt to Israel, since they have a peace and then joint security cooperation has been taking place in Sinai. And actually, most recently, in recent years, we have seen Israel allowed the Egyptian army to take over some or go over, extend its military presence over some areas, which according to the peace treaty, Egypt is not allowed to have soldiers there. And this is the sake of combating ISIS and eliminating terrorism in this part. So just this is a little bit of history of some cooperation and some acceptance from the Israeli side to help other Arab countries to do that. I think other issue is I want to mention is also, we all remember a few years ago when Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu appeared on CNN and talked openly about stealing his Mossad or his intelligence officer stealing information from the Iranian archives or the Iranian river, and then Bibi said a very famous sentence, and I think this sentence clicked with the Gulf leaders when he said, I'm going to be sharing that with our friends in the region, so we already have a history and of intelligence sharing, collections together, and but military bases and things like that, I cannot comment on that for now.
So let's take this to kind of the next, maybe a more, kind of abstract area.
Yeah, it is abstract. And I'll tell you where this started, and then it'll be clear what the topic is. I was going through, this is going to go a little bit into American politics right now. I was going through the websites of the Trump re-election and of the Joe Biden campaign. And
just for those who aren't familiar, the past couple of weeks, we've had a series of episodes digging into the American presidential elections from a Jewish and Israel perspective.
I thought I was this close to thinking that you were about to say, for those who aren't aware, the U.S. is having elections.
For those who aren't aware.
I was going to say the same thing, Benny.
Yeah, like we're aware. No, but for real, like the Biden administration has on their website this thing of like all of their different plans that they've outlined, plans for every single issue that you could possibly think of. And something that struck me as quite interesting was that they had, his plan for Jewish Americans, his plan for Muslim Americans, and his plan for Arab Americans. And I don't think that the reasoning behind doing that was because there are Muslims that are not Arabs. I think that it was something more deep. And I think it has to touch on how, particularly in the American or Western context and not in the Israeli context, Jews are seen themselves as primarily a religious identity, whereas Israeli Jews and many Zionist Jews in the States
and Orthodox Jews
would see themselves primarily as a national group or an ethnic group, which has a tribal origin and hence has a unique religious identity. So it was interesting to me, one, to see that he had made this difference, because many people in America can't wrap their heads around the fact that there are peoples of tribal origins that have unique religious identities. But I also wanted to say, like, how would Arabs living in the Middle East, or Arabs, Emiratis or Saudis or Egyptians see that? Now we're going into a time where there are more and more open relations with Israel as a member of this regional community. Do people in your countries see us, as a nation, or are we a religion? How are Jews perceived?
And I'll add here, one of the interesting things that was in the Abraham Accords was at least explicitly said, the kind of, we're talking about, we're the children of Abraham, we're the descendants of Abraham. So, when we always, within the Israeli kind of Palestinian context, one of the things that and if I'm not mistaken, this might have been kind of part of, I don't even want to get into this, but kind of like Marxist propaganda and kind of Palestinian and Marxist propaganda making it to the Western academia, but talking about trying to make Jews a white group, a privileged group, and then a religion as opposed to a people who have a religion. And so there's kind of like two different Jewish peoples today, the ones who see themselves as a people with a religion and the ones who say, no, we're white Americans and we're Jewish. And curious to know how Jews and specifically Israeli Jews are viewed in that sense, as far as what the Abraham Accords said. Is there an understanding beyond the text of the Abraham Accords saying, oh, you know what? The Israelis, the Jews, they belong in this region with us? Or is this kind of like a lip service? And then I'd be curious to get into a discussion about, after we talk about this, I'll be curious to get into discussion about Arab identity today among the younger generation, and kind of like, is there more of an individual sense, or is pan-Arabism over and we're now talking about, no, I'm an Egyptian, I'm a Saudi, I'm an Emirati? Or is that kind of pan-Arab identity still there? So maybe
not a difficult, lengthy question.
Guys, I want to tell you this. I'll let Najat and Haitham answer this, but there's actually something that's really interesting I want to point out. What is interesting is, I'm in the US. On the demographic census, there's not even Arab to tick. I have to put either I'm white or something. They told me, or Arab other. White. So everybody told me that if you're an Arab in America, you have to tick white. Like, whenever they tell you what is your ethnicity or what is your race.
No. We like, do. You're wrong. Because we're all in Asia. So we're all Asians.
This is crazy though, guys. It's ridiculous. Because so the problem with whatever Biden said, oh, I have something for Arabs in this. First, fix your census. Then tell us and ask us all those other things or propose those solutions. So anyways, that's all I wanted to add. There is an Arab box in the census in America. We have our own language, we have our own identity, and they need to fix that. So, okay, over to you guys.
I got to tell you, Omar, when I was, I'm first of all Israeli, and I've always said Israelis and Israeli Jews were Middle Eastern originally, and me specifically, I have an Iraqi background, so we're not white, and I always hated the fact that there was no Middle Eastern place on anything I filled out, college forms, all this. So I actually used to either say Asian, and I would wait for people to see me, or I would write in Middle Eastern. Sorry. So please, who wants to jump in first?
Who? Haitham, do you want to go first? Or
no one wants to take the question.
Okay, let me tell you now. In Saudi Arabia, things are going so clear that it is going geared to Saudi nationalism. Now you will see a lot of Saudis are saying, even in the social media, if you read Arabic, they will say Saudi first, Saudi Arabia first. So when this kind of concept is, even like the whole shift in the country is geared to that. When you say like now it's more Saudi nationalism or Saudi first, or and I even saw it among Emiratis. You see a lot of Emiratis are tweeting Al-Imarat أولاً, UAE is first. So what does it mean, UAE first? Means that it is that means the people or countries are looking for their interests. So it doesn't matter like you are Arab or not, as long as we are like aligned together in interest, you can be my ally. Maybe that will take time, but it is starting now. It's becoming more and more obvious. So this is what I can see. So as long, for example, my interest is with Israel, why I don't just break this kind of frozen and undiplomatic relations, and we can work out together. And I mentioned before about Prince Bandar bin Sultan's interview and the outcome of it. And I said, but now we are in and part of the outcome of this, my analysis of this interview is to setting the Arab Gulf Doctrine, which is political pragmatism. What does it mean, political pragmatism? And instead of, for example, let me say, this is only analyzing. I'm not giving you a facts. I'm analyzing the situation. Instead of cutting my diplomatic relationships with Israel, why I don't build this relationship with Israel in this way? I can even help the Palestinians themselves. And instead of cutting the relations, I can be playing a much more vital role than cutting the diplomatic relations. Secondly, and to me, it is the most important. Okay, you mentioned about Iran, Dan. You mentioned about Iran. Okay, I believe that Iran, you know, if we want to constrain its danger, we have to fight it ideologically. How we can fight it ideologically? Because they are playing with this Palestinian-Israeli conflict to spread and promote their ideologies. So if when I cut this kind of you know, tool that they're playing with, here I'm cutting the spread of ideology. So here I'm winning. Okay, I might get the backlash in the beginning, but if I'm thinking about it in the long run, I will be winning. Okay, they will call me traitor, they will call me all of these words that we, but at the end, you know, the people will recognize that what I'm doing is right. Okay, because logically you have used a certain trend for 72 years and you keep losing, so now we have to change. Okay, I'm going to help you if you are serious to solve this problem, unless you want to trade off with this issue. And also I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna even serve my interests. So basically, diplomatic relationship with Israel is not only helping Israel, it's helping me also, helping me to fight this radical ideology and to use the Palestinian Israeli conflict to you know, fulfill their ideologies and to fulfill their political agenda. At the same time, we are in the same target. Like even if we differ from Israel, like religiously or even culturally, but if I think about it politically, we are in the same path. Okay, the Israeli government is against the Iranian regime. Okay, it's not really aligned with the Erdogan Turkey. Okay, so when I analyze the Israeli government, I see it's aligned with me as a Saudi politically much more than a lot of Arab countries. So why will I cut the relationship with it? Because of what we call Arab brothers who are against my interest. Okay, and at the same time, by cutting this diplomatic relationship, I'm not even helping the Palestinians themselves. But in order to elevate the way of thinking to the people to that extent, it might take time. Okay, you know, even in a country like Saudi Arabia. Okay, because Saudi Arabia, by the way, is still transforming. You know, we just from the beginning of MBS ruling. In the beginning, we were so preoccupied by kind of, you know, a lot of constraints and a lot of lack of everything. But after MBS came, he changed the country tremendously, not only of opening up, but even in the mindset of the people. Because after the Iranian revolution and after the Juhayman attack on the Holy Mosque, Saudi Arabia was completely very, very strict for 40 years. So now, in order to change this mindset after 40 years of closing up, it's not easy. Even for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because all of that was fed up into their brain for more than 4 decades. Okay, in order to change this mindset, it will take time. You know, a lot of Saudis now are already changed, but a lot of them need also more changes. You know, and it will. Thank God, we are so blessed to have someone like MBS.
Is the direction of I mean, can we talk about the direction of identities in the Arab world as then drifting away from? I mean, practically this is the case, but is this happening on kind of like an identity level? If we're talking now as kind of, you know, scholars, if we're talking as you know, a lot of times I think people like us who have all grown up in one culture and been to others, we have the ability to step outside of ourselves and look at identities and you know, have multiple identities at the same time. Can we talk about Arab identity now going in this direction also of being post pan-Arab identity? So you're saying the Saudis are able to say, you know what, that hasn't gotten us anywhere. Let's look at what our interests are. Is it going even in a different direction, like past that? Is it even going to a direction of like pan-Arab identities over? What does it mean to be Arab anymore, or am I taking this too far? Omar, you said you wanted to jump in here.
Said he wanted to jump in.
I was
Do you want to
just
jump,
going to
Omar?
say one small thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, you know, Dan, I think you remember when I said this. You know, I said in my last symposium, actually with Trends, I said you remember how before here, this region that region, because I'm in the US now, but that region were known as like the Near East. Yeah, they used to call that the Near East. Then we went to the Middle East, and I think now we want to be known as the Modern East. Like we want to move away from this idea that when you think of the Middle East, the moment you say I am from the Middle East, you just think of one word: chaos. Because all around us, whether it's Yemen, you have Iran, you have Syria, Iraq, whatever, it's just chaos, you know? And it's not even like organized chaos, just unorganized chaos. It's like everywhere, you know? And that's the only thing they think of. So for us, what I love about my country, at least in the UAE, in the modern time, where we were like the beacon of hope and prosperity and progress, you know, the tallest building in the world, everything else. However, we do respect and we do love what happened in Egypt back in the time. Egypt was like at the forefront of so much. Iraq was known, you know, with the people used to go to universities in Iraq. People from the West, they didn't have schools or universities there. They used to go and study in the Middle East. So we want to go back to that golden era, at least, like, but in a different way now, away from this ideology of this Arabism or whatever, but just peace and progress. Because in the end of the day, really, this is what Islam teaches us. This is what I believe all religions preach, peace at the end of the day. So we don't want to have problems with Iran or with Turkey or whatever. When a lot of the times, even when we talk about it, we just talk about certain individuals on the top. But we know their people, and we know a lot of their people are amazing. Even, to be honest, in Saudi Arabia, you know, as Dr. Najatis mentioned, you know, people who were fed certain ideologies and stuff for so long, maybe some of them are still stuck in that way. But I just told you, I have a business in Saudi, and my partners are from Saudi. But to be honest, I mean, they went to high school in Lausanne, in Switzerland, and they went to university in like Northeastern in Boston. So they're like different. So like that's a different crowd of Saudi friends that I have. So now this is what we love. We're going back, and we're really happy with, you know, someone like Mohammed bin Salman, you know, and the king working on reforms and everything else. And hopefully this will be the new narrative in the region, and it'll be what being Arab is, being progressive.
Qaisam?
I have two comments. I will start first about the ideology comment. I really see there is an ideology vacuum in the Arab world. I really like Omar's point about instead of ideology, people should be progressive, thinking about the future and moving on. But like when I try to think about a common Arab, young Arab, especially, but also I realize the difference between the Gulf and the Arabs not from the Gulf, you know, Damascus, Cairo, Beirut, Baghdad, you know, and I'm really trying to understand these ones outside the Gulf. You know, if you're a young Egyptian growing up in Egypt, in Cairo in the 60s and the 50s, you have like ideology to believe in, something to mobilize on, you know, something to be running behind, you know. Even in the 70s, you have political Islamists are released from prison, you know, and then the door is open for them to preach their ideas and go and confront and have debates, even intellectual debates inside universities. When you read books of the intellectuals or the youngsters back then, you read about the fierce debates that used to exist at the time. Do we have that nowadays? I don't see that, and I think this makes a young Arab who grows up in Cairo, and I would argue Damascus, Beirut, and these countries aside from the Gulf. I would let Dr. Nagat and Omar talk about more. You know, they really feel they are like, they don't have a sense of purpose. They don't understand who they are. From one hand, their countries are struggling economically and socially, so they really don't have a future and they don't have something to look for. And from the other hand, also, if they want to be religious or get to this direction, they will fall into the issue, the ideologies of the political Islamists, and they understand their governments are gonna be cracking down on them, and they have issues with, and I'm talking specifically in the Egyptian case, you know, so they will have issues with that. So if he's gonna ask himself, who am I in this world, you know, who do I associate with, you know, should I read a couple of books for Lenin and Marcus and be associated with that, and still is not gonna fulfill what I want because my society wouldn't accept me? So I think there is an ideology vacuum, and in the Egyptian case, they are trying to reinvent the Egyptian nationalism, but so far it has not been working. People cannot relate to that. I will jump into your question about very quickly about your question about the views of Israel Zionism in the Egyptian case. Dr. Nagat covered it very well in the Gulf perspective. I think I'll use an example and I show the difference. When a young Saudi named Mohammed Saud traveled to Israel a couple of years ago and created a Twitter account, posted a picture with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and proudly supports Likud, chant every day in Hebrew, and talks about Judaism. And even there were American Jews or different Jews from different nationalities traveled to Saudi Arabia, and he posted videos with them on Twitter. It went viral. Al Jazeera talked about it, and everything was everybody.
I remember seeing it here. It was like, is this for real? Like, what's going on here?
Significance. Not many people thinking about it. What if an Egyptian did the same? You know, he still was able to go back to Saudi Arabia. I'm sure he's safe. He keeps posting these videos. He talks about it. He hosts Jews in his home. About it all the time, you know, and nothing happened for him. You know, imagine if somebody from Beirut or Baghdad or Cairo did such a thing. What could have happened to him? And this little of example, I'm sure explains it all to you. The differences between two different cultures and society. Yes, it's still Arabs, the same, but different mentalities and different societies, cultures, and things like that. In the Egyptian case, I think another challenge is, I think, intellectuals and, you know, yes, the President Sisi talks positively about relations with Israel a little bit. I wouldn't say directly. He even praised the Abraham Accords. Sudan just signed a peace normalization. He also praised it in Arabic and in English. But I think the major issue, and I call it the remnants of the Mubarak era. There are intellectuals who are remnants of the Mubarak era, who are very anti-Israel and still not convinced Sisi legitimacy or the Egyptian regime legitimacy or the mobilization of the Egyptian public should be centered around only political Islam or issues related to terrorism. They still believe there are bigger issues that should be injected into the Egyptian mindset in order to mobilize the public. And I think Israel should, in their minds, is still filling this gap, you know, especially after a few years, you know, the regime succeeded to crack down on Islamists. They are all exiled or in jail. You have terrorism decreased tremendously in the country. So if they look for something to mobilize the public around, what could it be? You know, so still Israel is this gap. So I think if they want to do something, they have to rethink new ideas. And instead of just mobilizing the public around an enemy, it should be mobilizing a public like that. I like Omar when he said that we are all mobilized around progress, peace, tolerance, moving on for the future and a bright future. But United Arab Emirates country has lots of money because of oil. In the Egyptian case, they don't have that. So this is a big challenge for them. What could they do? And I think this is a challenge they have to think about it.
I like what you said, Haitham. Can I just add one thing? You know, guys, one of the things that's common in whether you look at the Levant region, the Arab world, or even in the Gulf, the one thing that came up is youth unemployment. It's a major issue. Right now, that's all that the youth care about because you have a huge youth population in this region. And one of the things that all of us have in common, even for us in oil-producing countries, because, you know, look what happened in Saudi Arabia. They just tripled the VAT over there. You can see it's a huge issue. So, and you know, even with Oman as well. Oman, our neighboring country, we did not think that there's so many youth. I have so many cousins looking for jobs now in Oman. So it's a huge issue. So the one thing that we all have in common right now, whether it's this part of the Arab world or the other half of the Arab world or in North Africa, is employment, youth unemployment. We need to tackle that issue. That's the core issue of our problem right now. That's the major ideology. So if Arabs mean that we can support each other and build on entrepreneurship, you know, innovation, tech, etc., and, you know, build those capabilities, that's when we're going to be truly proud about being Arabs.
So look, you've all said something. You want to say one thing?
Yes, I want to say one thing, just a small points. The first point that I want to talk about is basically, I'm afraid that there will come a day that people will be actually conflicting with the Palestinians more than the Israelis one day. Why I'm saying that? Because what I can see through the Palestinians, in general, I'm talking, not everybody, they're not. They couldn't recognize the changes that are happening in the Arab world. like what Omar says and Haitham said. Now people are thinking progressively and thinking about how to modernize, how to think about their employments, how to change, and they are still thinking. Even the younger generations are thinking about the older way of thinking, the Nasriyat way of thinking, and the same. They are using the same slogans, which doesn't affect at all the younger generations now. So this is the main clash, and it shows you that things are progressing, because they're going certain way, and we're going to the other way. We want more development. We want to progress technologically, educationally, and they're still thinking about slogans and how to wipe out Israel. The same slogans back in the 60s. So this is the differences in way of thinking currently. The other thing that shows you that things are different, like I would say that still with all the progress that we have in the Arab Gulf drama, still the Egyptian drama is influential. Okay, because the actors, because the history of movies in Egypt is much more sophisticated than the Arab Gulf, because of they have been into this field years ago. So, like a couple of years ago, when Ra'fat al-Hajjan is a drama serial that was played in the Arab countries, it has a huge impact in the Arab world. And it was basically, with this kind of propaganda, about Israelis and Israel and the hostilities that was spread, and it did have an impact on the Arab world, especially on Saudi Arabia, because the people spend a lot of time watching TV. Okay, and also the movies. Like, for example, there's a famous actress, Egyptian actress called Nadia Jundi. She played a couple of movies like Muhimma and Tel Aviv and other kind of movies. It did have an impact on the Arab region in general, because when you say Arab movies, usually 90% you say it is actually Egyptian, and a lot of Saudis watch it. But now, like when I compare the impact of those old movies to the new ones, like for example Al Mamar that was played in the movies in the movie theaters back in 2019, and Nihaya, it's also a drama serial that was played this Ramadan. Okay, it didn't have the same impact. People even criticized it. Said, what the heck, you're still talking at the same mentality, you're still using the same scenario that you used back in the 60s. So it didn't have the same strong impact that the other old movies have. And from there you can tell the difference in the region. Okay, that it is really moving forward. People started to laugh at it.
I love what Dr. Najat mentioned, because in Ramadan, the last Ramadan, it was epic. In Saudi Arabia, they have this amazing actor called Nasser Al-Qasabi, and they
Exit 7.
Yes, Exit 7. Makhraj Sab'a is and it was amazing because his son, so Nasser's son, was actually playing video games, something like one of those like Minecraft or something, with another kid in Israel. So this Israeli kid was friends with him, and then in the scene you can see like the father was like upset, but actually his father-in-law, so Nasser's father-in-law, was kind of cool with it. He was like, so what if he has a friend in Israel, and whatever. But that guy was like, oh, but there are enemies. He was like, no, they didn't do anything to us, and we didn't have. So this was in Saudi, like this sitcom right now in Ramadan. So I was like, I know it's going to happen with Saudi Arabia. I actually thought maybe the announcement was going to happen between Saudi Arabia and Israel before the UAE, to be honest. When I saw that.
The thing is, when it does happen, you're going to go back to that point when you're watching that TV show as the moment that you knew.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I thought.
I have to say, and then we'll kind of start wrapping up here.
Well, first, Omar, you have to go soon. We know you have an appointment, and our technical issues delayed you. So if you had something to say, and leave us, and then we'll go to our two other guests here for the same question. You optimistic?
Yeah.
You seem like an optimistic guy. Are you optimistic about? Certainly, I think you'd be very optimistic about the UAE. But are you optimistic about the future of the region right now? Where do you see things going? And kind of, before you have to leave us for your next appointment, where do you see the region going?
Look, if you have President Sisi, you have Mohammed bin Salman, you have Sheikh Mohammed Zayed, like these main ones. Of course, there are others. You have these three. We're going to be more than optimistic. If there's another word over that, then yes, I'm gonna. This is my opinion. Okay, and and in terms of the relationships and everything else, look, I only have to warn you guys in Israel about one thing. Emiratis, they're quite the charmers. So they're going to come there and charm your women, and so hold on to your women. That's all I can say. Because already now, some of the Israeli women that went, they were all given marriage proposals. And this is what I heard. So, I can tell you that. So good luck.
I would say something about Israeli women right now to counter that about what you guys might not want to do. But my wife's listening to this right now, so I'm gonna.
Women are really tough.
Yeah, I heard. We know, but anyways, no. But it's honestly, there's a lot of opportunities I think that can happen from a business perspective, from social perspective, and these things that we see right now, all these agreements announced just by the government entities and semi-government. What you're going to see on the ground that will happen between the two people is far more. And people like you, Dan and Benny, thank you so much for having a podcast like this. I told you, I listened to so many of your episodes while I'm sitting at home, and I'm sure that you guys are going on the right path. Thank you guys. And Haysam and Najat, like, I love these two. Like, honestly, I love them. I just want to sit down and have separate conversations with them. So thank you for to them.
We should.
And we're going to continue these conversations in the policy forum that the four of us, sorry, Benny, are a part of. You're not a policy guy. What can I tell you? But we're going to
be the mascot. I could just show up and I could bring drinks and food and
but we're gonna barbecue. I have a feeling that through this forum we're going to be hosting a lot of podcasts here. So Omar, whenever you have to go, feel free, because I know you have your appointment. And you and me, we're going to write that book, The Modern East, man. That's going to be our bestseller.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Haysam, you had a comment, and then so thank you so much, Omar. You had a comment, and then are you optimistic? Do you see yourself going back to Egypt? Are you optimistic about the region as a whole? Give us your take. Hopefully it's optimistic, but your honest take would be better.
Okay. No. Honestly, I think I'm optimistic since last August. If you asked me before August, I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, because I see nothing changing. Destruction being collapsing, and governments are struggling. No, I think I'm very optimistic about the future, especially the peace deals that sweeping across the region. But I want to mention something, and I want to play with the idea, because I like Dr. Nagat's point about the Palestinians. She's afraid the next conflict is going to be with the Palestinians. I think, yes, initially, it will be with the intellectuals and the politicians from the Palestinian side, because he still cannot process what's happening around them in the region. But they will struggle with the different opinions are going to be sweeping or going across the streets. And I will give you a little bit of an example. We all heard about the Arab joint list when they opposed the deal between Israel and its Arab neighbors in the Knesset. Yes, who elected them? Arab.
Yeah, I was in shock, by the way.
Yes, me too. But actually, it was interesting. Two interesting things. The reports said there were some people inside the Arab joint list, some Knesset members, were opposing that, and others were not. But at the end of the day, they had to unify themselves and go that direction. I think they did that while the Arab-Israeli street, or as they identify themselves, Palestinian citizens of Israel, are so excited about the peace deal and happy, and they start to see the fruits of it, because for the first time, an Arab citizen of Israel, soccer player, goes to the United Arab Emirates, plays for a Nasr club, and everybody cheering for him. They follow him on Instagram, and they see the post he posts about Dubai and living there and the luxurious lifestyle there, and the many opportunities are going to be coming up with that. Arab Israeli students study electrical engineering, they study in high-tech technologies, and all these kinds of things. The Technion, look how many of them are Arab Israeli students there, I'm sure many of them are going to be looking for opportunities. So I think, yes, at the beginning, you will have some politicians or intellectuals from Palestinian citizen of Israel or Arab citizen of Israel, are going to say no to that. But right away, the local population and the local public are going to see the fruits of that, and they're going to stand up and be different. Even I'm trying to imagine when United Arab Emirates will have an embassy soon in Tel Aviv. Look at the amount Arab Israeli or even Palestinians in the West Bank are going to be flocking around the embassy and trying to get donations, trying to get ideas to help with the private sector, high-tech entrepreneurship, and all of these things. And how is that going to be reflected on their socio-economic lifestyles? And this is going to make the public go in a different direction than the politician and the intellectuals. And I'm sure the politician and the intellectual by then will find themselves having to adjust their views. And by a way or another, I think Palestinians are not going to be like going the aggressive direction we see now. I'm trying to read into the future. Not sure how it's going to work, but I'm just trying to read into it.
Thank you. Thank you. Najat, would you care to offer maybe a last comment, your kind of vision of the future? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Where do you see things going?
I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic because I can see the people and the leaders are now, thinking realistically and thinking in a pragmatic way. The other thing that is making me optimistic, because before, I know a lot of people were trying to be apologists to mistakes. Okay, like through the interview, especially after the interview of Prince Bandar bin Sultan, he said that there are a lot of things I was quiet about it, but I couldn't say it. Now he said it. The fact that he said that means things are changing. Okay, and the other thing, the most important thing, after this Abraham Accord, people, we always been asked, where are the moderate Arabs? Where are the liberal Arabs? Why they're not speaking up? Okay, because we are afraid. Okay, if I talk what I'm talking right now, I will be called a traitor. My life might be in threat. Like Haytham, why we didn't see Haytham like before? Why now he's encouraged? And I'm sure there are a lot of Arabs who have his same opinion, but they are afraid. And the more Arab countries are gonna make this kind of peace treaty, the more Arabs are gonna be speaking up. Like me, for example, I was before writing subtly because I was pro this peace years ago, but I couldn't write in the same way that I'm writing right now. After this Abraham Accord, now I can write courageously, openly. I don't need to write in that subtle way and covering up. So that's why I'm very optimistic, but the only thing that is making me quite, not pessimistic, but, thinking about, the conflict that might happen. Because whenever you're trying to transform something from one perspective to another, okay, definitely there will be backlash. Definitely there will be people who are against it, because you're talking about things that have been in the region for ages. Okay, and now you want to open a new page and new way of thinking, and you want to throw out those kind of outdated ideologies and build a new kind of pragmatic way of thinking. That won't be an overnight thing. It will take time, and some people will try to resist it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only thing that I'm worried about, like for example, if we want to think about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the Palestinians will, those who are trying to resist it, might try to resist it, by slogans, or might try to resist it actually by doing things like, fighting with the Iranians against us, fighting with Erdogan, for example, against us, and they are doing that, but maybe they will do it much more openly. Okay, because whenever you're in something, you have to think about all the probabilities, and there are a lot of big chance of them doing that. If they're not thinking realistically and in pragmatic way, they might do it. And so here the conflicts will be in internally. In order to convince people, it will take time. So here we have to play it smart through the soft power, through diplomacy, through media, and media both hard talk, soft talk, drama, movies, everything. We have to use everything in order to education system, of course, everything, all the stuff. We have to energize our soft power in every field, and even in both languages, Arabic, English, because also, mind you, the Western media is not helping us as open-minded, and as a new kind of generation, new thoughts of Arabs. The leftiest media and the liberal media is working against us because they have not because they are pro-Islamist or pro-Arab nationalism, because they have their own political agenda, and those people are helping them, but this is in our own expense. So that's why we have to work, and from all perspectives, from the in the Arab side and in the Western side, both together, in order. So there will be challenges, but regardless of these challenges, I'm still optimistic, very optimistic.
Let me ask you this, because I'm like, we're having a very lengthy conversation, and all of a sudden at this very last moment, like, it kind of clicked in my head a little bit watching you speak about this this point exactly. Like, you've kind of, Dan and I live here, okay, and we grew up when we were younger in the States, and like the last thing we think of is like, okay, if I say this, there may be implications on my family, there may be implications on my well-being or my life. Like, okay, nowadays there's like cancel culture and whatnot, and like maybe like I won't get the job or something, and maybe it can be worse than that as if time goes by. But I can't imagine what it is like for somebody to almost be like closeted about their opinions in such a way, and then these sorts of giant wheels start moving, and old things that are stuck start unsticking, and it's like in many ways, like, do you feel like it's liberating for you?
What
like, do you feel like liberating, like in a way, like, okay, I don't have to be anonymous, I can
do you feel there's like a huge,
is there like a release?
Yeah, a big release. Big release after this Abraham Accord. I'm feeling I can breathe. Before I was like, I couldn't, I don't write in Arabic these thoughts. I write it in English and subtly. Imagine. And when I write it in English, I couldn't publish it in mainstream media. I go to conservative media to publish it because I know the mainstream media maybe won't publish it. So I was so cautious because this is very, very sensitive issue. I couldn't be just open about it because I know I will be misunderstood. Nobody will take my opinion that I am patriotic and I care about the region and I wanted to be progressive and I wanted to think out of the box. I know what they will be saying. The same slogans. So yes, now I'm feeling a big release. Now what I'm saying, the governments are saying. Now what I'm saying, the leaders are saying. So I'm not saying something out of the blue or something taboo or something like I'm not being loyal citizen or something. No, that's why it is a big release. Definitely yes.
Amazing.
So this has been an incredible panel for us, an incredible kind of Jewanced experience. And we thank you for enriching us with some Jewance over here. Can we find an Arabic equivalent for the word Jewance? How do you say nuance in Arabic? What would be the Arabic word for nuance?
I'm trying to think.
So our next project, and we're going to continue this conversation offline, we're going to come up with the Arabic, because Jewanced is a portmanteau. So we're going to come up with the Arabic equivalent of Jewanced. By the way, we were trying to talk before we went on air. What would be the Jewish equivalent of an Islamist? And we came up with Yehudist. So we would have a Yehudist, which is like the Jewish equivalent of Islamists. So now our goal, and we'll get Omar back and maybe any of our friends who, Arab friends, if we can come up with the Arab word for Arab nuance, maybe we can figure out a way to take this podcast into the Arab world. We thank you guys so much. This has been really, really a pleasure. And for those who started out the podcast and actually made it past the technical difficulties at the beginning, we thank you all for your patience. Well,
I would just say, like, it was a pleasure having a conversation that was about the region of the world that we all live in, that was optimistic
and through other perspectives that we don't usually get to hear. And we hope that we will get to hear a lot more of these perspectives soon. And I'm hopeful for the day. Najat, you said you have to be courageous, and Haitham, you had to be courageous when you came here to study. I can't wait for the day when you guys can just say things that are, forget positive, just normal about Israel, and you don't have to be courageous to do it. It's just the normal thing, and and hopefully that day will come sooner than later. So Haitham Hassanin and Dr. Najat El Said and Omar Al Busaidi, who was with us and had to go, and Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan Nahum, who was with us for the beginning. We thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of Jewanced.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Jewanced is a joint creation of Benny Shoulder and Dan Pfefferman. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts.
For more information and show notes about this and previous episodes, visit us at Jewanced.com and feel free to hit us with your comments and suggestions. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you back for the next episode of Jewanced.